The rice husks had cut my palms open in 11 places, and I only found that out because the blood was making the grain stick to my hands. That was harvest day, my first one. I had spent a year on 2 acres of dirt that started out hard enough to bend a hoe, and I had 100 bushels of green bamboo rice sitting in the yard in neat, stacked sacks, still warm from the sun, smelling like sweet grass and money. Then the sect's collection cart came up the hill and took 40 of them. That part was the contract. 60-40, farmer keeps 60. And honestly, for a servant of the wind spirit sect, that was generous. The demonic sects took 90. Then Steward Liang's men took 30 more. There was no contract for that part. There was just a fat man in an embroidered robe lying in a sedan chair at the edge of my field, not even looking at me, and a scale that his people had brought themselves, and a number they read off it that had nothing to do with what was on it. I stood there with my hands bleeding into my own rice and did the math. 100 bushels in, 30 bushels out. Just bear with it, said the man supervising the theft, Han San Bao. Round shoulders, wet little eyes, the kind of face that looks like it's already apologizing for something it hasn't done yet. He patted my sack of rice the way you'd pat a dog you were about to sell. Everyone bears with it. You'll get used to it. I said, sure, and I meant it, is the thing. I did get used to it. I got used to it for 4 years. Let me explain what I was, because it matters. I was not from here. I woke up in this world in a body that wasn't mine, in the Canglan Cultivation Country, where the mountains are full of people who can throw fire, and the flatlands are full of people who grow their food. I landed on the food side, Spiritual Field District C, Plot C357. 3 rooms around a dirt courtyard, a coarse robe, a hoe, and a handbook that taught 2 spells. 1 cut grass, 1 made it rain a little. That was the whole package. Servant class. Below outer disciple, below inner sect, below everything. A commoner in a mortal town had more rights than me because a commoner could leave. And in a world like that, there is exactly one thing that decides your entire life, and you get it once, at 16, at the Ascension Conference. The Heavenly Dao reaches down and puts a blessing in you, an innate blessing. Gray, white, green, blue, purple, gold, and everything about who you are going to be for the next 400 years is decided in the 8 seconds it takes for that light to come out of your chest. Elder Li, who lived next door, put it to me like this over a bowl of rice. Without a special opportunity, cattle and horses stay cattle and horses. He wasn't being cruel, he was being accurate. Which brings me to my own Ascension Conference, 4 years before that harvest. 16 years old, in a crowd of 600 kids, hands sweating. They all lit up. I got a line of cold text in the middle of my skull. You failed to receive a Heavenly Dao Blessing. Nobody else saw it. That's the worst part. No announcement, no gasp, no elder pointing at me. Just me and the sun, being told politely by the universe that it did not recognize my existence. Whatever ledger the Heavenly Dao keeps, my name wasn't in it, and it does not hand gifts to people who cheated their way onto the guest list. A deacon started walking toward my row with a list in his hand. A child with no blessing isn't a disappointment here. A child with no blessing is a mistake, and mistakes get walked to the back mountain, and the back mountain has no return trip. 40 seconds to live. No plan. Then a second line appeared, and it was warmer than the first, the way a knife is warmer than the air after it's been in someone. Stealing heavenly secrets is now active. The Heavenly Dao would not give me a blessing, so I was going to take one. 3 options unfolded in front of me, like a hand of cards. That's how it works, I'd learn. It always offers 3, and it is always, always at least a little bit insulting. Option 1. Reversing dual cultivation. Yin-yang grade, which is the Heavenly Dao's way of saying great upside, and also read the fine print. Doubled cultivation speed. Downside, my gender would flip, permanently, immediately. Option 2. Accumulate small steps. White grade, bottom of the barrel. Effect. Every acquired blessing I ever obtained would make me cultivate slightly faster. Stacking. Forever. Option 3. God of pure yang. White grade. If I remained a virgin for 200 years, I would form a golden core instantly. I looked at that third one for a while. 200 years. I'd have to write it on a wall somewhere to keep track. I took option 2, and I want to be clear about why, because it wasn't wisdom, it was arithmetic. The system had told me something in its own description without meaning to. It said acquired blessings, plural, and it said them like they were a thing you could accumulate. Everybody in this world gets one innate blessing at 16, and then one acquired blessing at each major realm. 4 or 5 in a lifetime if you're a monster. I got one every time I broke a minor realm, every single level of Wu refining. Choose one of 3 every time. So I stood in that square with the worst blessing on the field and watched the deacon lose interest in me and walk right past, and quietly became the only person in the Canglan Cultivation Country who was going to be handed a menu every 3 months for the rest of his life. Then I went and farmed rice for 4 years. Look, I know. Believe me, I know. A cheat like that and the correct move is to run into the wilderness and come back as a monster. But I had just watched the universe try to erase me for the crime of existing wrong, and I had drawn one conclusion from it that I never let go of afterward. The dangerous thing is not being weak. The dangerous thing is being interesting. So I kept my head down. I turned 2 acres of stone into the best yielding field in the district, and I let a man with wet little eyes take my rice. The Lins moved in beside me that first winter. 4 of them, 3 courtyards down, and the reason I'm telling you about them instead of about my cultivation is that they are the entire reason any of the rest of this happened. Li Wei was the son, square face, honest to the point of being slow about it, the kind of man who apologizes to a wall he walked into. Mei Fen was his wife, and she had a way of putting food in front of you before you knew you were hungry. Elder Li was the father, 70-something, a pipe permanently welded to his lower lip. And there was a kid, 11 years old, Li Xiaohua, second girl. That was her name. In the mortal world where they came from, poor families numbered their daughters and stopped there, and nobody had ever gotten around to giving her a real one. That first dinner, they brought spirit rice and wine and sat in my dirt yard, and Elder Li gave me the speech he'd clearly given 100 times. This world is a place where people eat people, he said, tapping ash into the fire. It's already good if they want to feed you first and eat you slowly. Then he made everyone show their cards. That's a real custom out there, by the way. New neighbors, second cup of wine, everybody says their innate blessing out loud. It's not bragging, it's the fastest way to find out whether the family next door can be trusted with your children. Li Wei had unwavering will. White. He would never break under pressure, which is a beautiful thing to have if you are never going to be under any. Mei Fen had good luck, also white. Slightly better odds at finding things. Elder Li knocked out his pipe and grinned at me with about 6 teeth. Mine's fun, a life that grows stronger with age, yin-yang grade. The older he got, the tougher his body became, bones like a man of 30 at 70 and climbing. The price was that his cultivation crawled. He'd been at the bottom of Wu refining since before his son was born, and he was going to die there. So I'll be the strongest, useless old man in the world, he said, delighted with himself. Then everyone looked at me. Accumulate small steps, I said, white, and I watched 4 faces do the exact same small, polite thing at the exact same time, which was to arrange themselves into, I knew it. Little Li Xiaohua kept eating. She was the only one who didn't look at me differently, and I think that's because at 11, she hadn't yet learned that a person could be worth less than another person. Here is the part where I explain the thing that killed them. There's an item in this world called a blessing jade slip. You refine it, and it hands you an acquired blessing you didn't earn. It's the only way a servant's child ever climbs, and it exists in exactly 2 places, inside a Heavenly Dao secret realm, and inside the cave of somebody powerful who died and left it lying there. Both of those are places you go to die. The Chen couple talked about it for 3 days. Elder Li fought them the whole way, and he lost, because their argument was 1 sentence long and it was unanswerable. If we don't, Xiaohua is a servant, and her children are servants, and it never stops. They left at dawn. Both of them stood on the ridge above the fields and waved back at us, and Mei Fen shouted something about being home before the rice came in. Xiaohua cried all night. I could hear it through 2 walls. I sat in my yard and wove grasshoppers out of dried grass stalks until sunrise, because it was the only thing I had that a kid might want, and in the morning I left about 30 of them on their doorstep. 6 months. Then a year. Elder Li took the girl up to that ridge every single evening at the same hour and stood there with her until it got dark, and every single evening they came back down. He also, somewhere in there, decided to teach me everything he knew. He taught me the earth turning technique, which is a farming trick and not a spell, and about 900 small things about soil and water and when to plant that nobody writes down. My yield went from 100 bushels to 150. Steward Liang's men took 100 of them. I kept 50. That was the reward for being 50% better at my job than anyone in the district, 20 extra bushels. I remember standing in the yard afterward doing that math too, and thinking, very calmly, that there was no number I could reach by working that would ever get me out. That same season, I broke through to the second level of Wu refining, and the menu opened. Swift as the wind, green. Faster on your feet. A slap can make a sound, gray. I could slap someone from 10 meters away. It would sting, and it would be loud. Wu training expert, green. Cultivation speed at the level of a blue-grade blessing, for as long as I stayed in Wu refining. I took the third one, and my cultivation speed tripled overnight, and I want to note that at this point I was a man with a triple-speed engine using it to farm rice at the bottom of the world. Then came the night I heard crying in Elder Lee's yard. Not the girl, him. In the morning the house was empty, all three of them, gone. It took me 2 days of walking to find out where, and what I found, 5 miles out past the last field, was a row of fresh grave mounds. Elder Lee's name, Li Wei's name, Mei Fun's name, and Han San Bao's. I stood in front of 4 graves for a very long time, and then I went home, and Elder Lee was sitting on his own doorstep smoking his pipe like nothing had happened. He looked up at me, and his face was a stranger's. From today, he said, our 2 families have no relationship. Behind the door, I could hear Xiaohua sobbing into her hands. I went home. I didn't argue. I'd like to tell you I understood immediately, but I didn't, not for months. All I knew was that a man who had fed me for 2 years had cut me off in one sentence, and had gone to the trouble of building 4 graves. One of them had his own name on it. One of them belonged to a man who was, as far as I could tell, still very much alive and still very much taking my rice. The answer came in pieces, the way bad answers do, and it came through a man named Gao Ming. Gao Ming drove the supply cart. Everybody in 3 districts knew him. His blessing was full of energy. He never got tired. He could drive an ox cart for 18 hours and then drink you under the table. I liked him immediately, because he was the only person in my life at that point who talked to me like a person and not like a soil condition. He brought me wine. I brought him rice. And one night, 4 cups in, he told me what he'd heard on the road. Li Wei's body had been found at Bifeng Gorge, 5,000 miles out. What was left of him, anyway. Mei Fun had not been found at all, and the man who had gone and brought Li Wei's corpse back home, at his own expense, out of the goodness of his heart, was Han San Bao. I put my cup down. Because Han San Bao had been sweet as syrup to the Chen family for the past 2 months. He'd moved into the empty courtyard right next to theirs. He'd started bringing the old man tobacco. And he had begun, very publicly and very politely, to court a 14-year-old girl. Why? Gao Ming said, and then answered himself, because he wasn't stupid either. Because a woman crawls 5,000 miles home carrying something and doesn't tell anyone what it is, that's why. I asked whether the sect would look into a servant dying out in the wild. Gao Ming laughed so hard he had to put his cup down. Brother Li, he said, wiping his eyes, the one thing the sects have in abundance is servants. That night, I broke through to the 3rd level of Wu refining, and the Heavenly Dao offered me 3 yin-yang cards, and for the first time I did not pick the one that was best for farming. Trinity Force, triple strength, 3rd of the speed. The night is coming. Immense power in darkness, blind in daylight. Demon transformation. For a short time, I could take on the physical strength of a creature 2 minor realms above me. The cost was that while it lasted, I would not be a human being. I took demon transformation. And I'd like to say I agonized over it, but the truth is I picked it in about 4 seconds, for 2 reasons. 1, it made me stronger than I looked. 2, and this is the reason that actually mattered, nobody in this world can identify a man from the shape of a monster. I got to use it about a week later. It was midday. I was walking back from my own field with a hoe on my shoulder when I heard a sound out of the Chen courtyard that I can only describe as a bag of wet sand hitting a wall. Elder Li was in the wall, actually embedded in it, waist deep in dried mud brick, coughing up something dark onto his own chest, and standing in front of him with his hands behind his back like a schoolmaster, was Han San Bao. Except the aura coming off Han San Bao was not a first-level servant's. 4th level. He'd been sitting on it for years, the same way I'd been sitting on mine. I remember a very specific kind of cold going through me, because it meant that every single time that man smiled at me and told me to bear with it, he had been strong enough to take my head off, and had simply decided I wasn't worth the trouble yet. "The treasure," he said. "Your daughter-in-law crawled 5,000 miles home with it in her guts. Where is it?" The old man said nothing. "You want to know what happens next?" Han San Bao's voice went pleasant. "Nothing happens to you. You're 70. I take the girl. She's 14. She's got no father, no mother, and no cultivation. And there is not one person in this district who will ask me a question about it. And I want to be very clear about something, because I have thought about this moment a lot since. I was standing in the doorway. He had already seen me. He had seen me the entire time, and the whole speech had been for my benefit, because he knew I'd come, and while he was still talking, he flicked a hidden dart at my throat. That's the part that decided it. Not the old man in the wall, not the threat. The fact that he made his monologue and his murder attempt in the same breath, like a man doing 2 chores at once. Demon transformation. I went from 3rd level to something around a 5th in the space of a heartbeat, and the dart went through the space where my neck used to be, and the doors came off their hinges, and what came into that yard was 10 feet of wolf. He had a golden bell shield talisman. It was a good one. It went up. I went through it like a hand through a paper lantern, and then my claws were in his throat, and then his throat was in the dirt about 2 meters from the rest of him. Silence. An old man half buried in a wall, and a 14-year-old girl in the doorway of the house, both of them staring at a monster standing over a corpse. Elder Li got himself out of that wall. Took him a while. Then he walked over to Xiaohua, put his hand on the back of her head, and said, in the flattest voice I have ever heard a human being use, "There were no demons here. Grandpa killed him. Say it." She said it. He spent the next 2 hours cleaning that yard, scrubbed the blood out of the packed earth with a broom and a bucket, replastered the hole in his own wall, swept the flagstones twice. Then he stood there breathing hard, an old man who could not cultivate, but whose bones got stronger every year, and he looked past me at my courtyard. "I have to let them believe the treasure isn't here," he said. "That's the only thing that keeps her alive." I carried the body 30 miles that night and dug a 2-meter hole in a river valley cave with my own claws, which I do not recommend as a use of a supernatural gift. His storage bag had over 50 spirit stones in it, a dart artifact, a turtle shell shield, and a technique called the concealing breath technique. I buried the spirit stones with him. A dirt-poor spiritual farmer who suddenly has 50 spirit stones is a story, and stories get told. The concealing breath technique. I kept, and from that night until a very long time later, every single person who looked at me saw exactly the same thing. Cultivation Level 2. Steward Liang came out to investigate the disappearance. He stood in my yard with 2 thugs, brushed my aura with his consciousness the way you'd flick a dead fly off a table, and made a face. 4 years, he said. 4 years and still level 2. You're the worst of the worst. And the worst of the worst here are already the worst there are. Then he left. He interrogated Elder Li for 3 days. I don't know exactly what happened in that room. The old man came back walking wrong and said nothing at all about it, ever. Here's where he broke my heart. Midnight, maybe 10 days later, knocking at my door. Xiaohua, standing there with a stealth talisman stuck to her arm and a letter in her hand, and behind her the ridge, and on the ridge, walking away, an old man with a bundle on his back. The letter was 2 letters. The outer one was for anyone who might read it. Gruff, badly written, no feelings in it anywhere. I'm going out to look for my son. Look after Xiaohua for a year or 2. Here's 20 spirit stones for her food. If anything happens to her while I'm gone, I'll come back and fight you, old as I am. The inner one was for me. Changhe died covering his wife's retreat, it said. Yuanyang crawled home 6 months ago with her body already finished, put the thing in my hands, and died in this house without ever telling her daughter she'd come back. They are still watching us. As long as I am alive in this district, they will keep looking at me, and while they look at me, they see the girl standing next to me. So I am going to Baifeng Gorge, and I am going to die out there with the secret in my mouth, and after that, there will be nothing left to look at. At the bottom was a sketch map, hand-drawn, of where the treasure was buried. And under the map, one more line. If you cannot carry that much wealth, it will end your family too. Xiaohua never read a word of it. She stood in my doorway while I read it, and when I looked up, she took it out of my hands, tore it into strips, put the strips in her mouth, and ate them one at a time with tears running down her face. She was 14. She moved in that night. For the first 3 days, she slept squatting in the corner of the room, upright, arms around her knees, because she was not going to be a person who took up space in someone else's house. I built her a plank bed. She followed me everywhere after that, to the field, to the well, to the storeroom, and she'd stand about a meter behind me and just be there, the way a kitten does after the second time it's been left somewhere. 10 days later, Steward Liang came back with 3 men and stood in my yard and made a suggestion. The suggestion was that I'd made the old man disappear so I could own a 14-year-old girl. I handed him the letter, the outer one. He read it twice, and then he told me the thing he'd actually come to say, which is that Elder Li had been found at Bifeng Gorge, and there wasn't much of him left, and they'd only identified him by his sect token. Xiaohua was standing in the doorway. She heard all of it. I'll skip what she sounded like. What I found out later, because I did eventually get very good at finding things out, is what Steward Liang said in his carriage on the way back down the hill. His man asked whether they should keep an eye on the household. No, Liang said. The old fool died over a treasure map, and the beast that ate him chewed the map to pieces. There's nothing at the end of that road. 2 nobodies aren't worth the watching. He reclaimed the Chen fields and the Chen courtyard that same week, and the old man's plan worked perfectly. It worked so well that the price of it was that nobody in the world would ever know he'd paid it. Then I spent 2 years raising a kid, and I did it wrong on purpose. I bought her dresses, and then I bought her cosmetics, and I taught her to use the cosmetics to make herself look plainer, duller, muddier in the face. She asked me why once, and I told her the truth, which is that a tree that stands taller than the forest is the one the wind snaps. I taught her doctrine, and my doctrine was not nice. Do not stand out. Do not beg. Begging tells a person they own you, and there is no way to take that back. If someone decides to hurt you, do not wait to see how much. Strike first. And if you cannot win, take a piece of them with you on the way out, because the only thing a predator understands is cost. And once a month, I made her butcher an animal. Chickens first. She threw up for the first 4 months. Then ducks, then a pig, then, when she was 15, a cow. I stood there and made her do the cut herself every time, and I did not let her look away, and I know exactly how that sounds. Here's why. In this world, the first time you have to end something is going to happen whether you prepared for it or not, and the people who freeze in that half second are the people who get buried by the people who don't. I was not going to hand her a life in which her first act of violence was also her last. By the end of it, she was arguing with me about which cut of beef was better than pork, holding a knife, covered to the elbows, entirely calm. She hit 16 at about 5'7", hair up in a ponytail, and there was something in her eyes by then that made grown men in the district find somewhere else to be. Gao Ming started making jokes about weddings. I changed the subject every time, and I changed it fast, because the thought had crossed my mind, and I had not liked what it said about me. She had come to me at 14 with nothing left. Whatever I was to her, I had not earned the right to also be that. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I broke through to the 4th level of Wu refining, and the menu came up, and it did the single most annoying thing it had ever done. Respect for the dead. White. Your corpse remains intact, and everyone treats you with reverence. Talisman proficiency. Green. 20% higher success rate when making talismans. Rising from the coffin. Purple. If your corpse remains intact and buried for 100 years, you come back to life. Do you see it? Card 1 and Card 3 are the same card cut in half. Together, they are a free extra life, an actual purple tier immortality trick sitting on the table in front of a man who farms rice. And you can only ever take one. I have never in my life wanted to reach into my own skull and grab something with both hands the way I wanted to right then. I took talisman proficiency, because I had a plan, and the plan needed talismans, and I have thought about those other 2 cards approximately once a week ever since. 3rd stack of accumulate small steps, by the way. Nobody could tell. That's the whole beauty of a white grade blessing that nobody respects. It is the only kind that can make you dangerous in public. That same week, Xiaohua asked me for the first thing she had ever asked me for. Give me a real name, she said. Second girl isn't a name, it's a number. I told her after the Ascension Conference. She was 17 days out from it. The Ascension Conference happens on the square in front of the Wind Spirit sect's main gate, and it is the single most brutal social event I have ever attended, which is impressive for a thing where nobody hits anybody. 600 16-year-olds sit in rows on stone benches. Behind them stand every parent, grandparent, uncle, and neighbor who could get a day off. Up front, on a raised platform, sit the elders of the sect, and their entire job for the next 4 hours is to sit there and pick. Xiaohua got seated between two people who could not have been designed better if I'd ordered them. On her left, a young master named Wu Lei. Silk, perfume, a fan he did not need, and behind him a genuine Foundation establishment elder of his own family, standing there radiating, "I am here so nothing goes wrong for my nephew." On her right, a girl named Sima Hui, who was a princess. An actual princess, from an actual mortal dynasty, who had been delivered here with an escort and a chest of gifts, and who had spent the walk up explaining to everyone within earshot that certain people would be treated very differently after today. Both of them looked at the muddy-faced farm girl between them exactly once, and then never again. Gao Ming was there too, 3 rows back, gripping his own knees, because his son Gao Yun was in that crowd. They handed out pills. Everybody swallowed. Then the parents knelt. All of them. 600 families, on the flagstones, foreheads down, praying to a sky that was about to make a decision it did not intend to explain. I stood. I was the only one standing in the entire square, and I want to be honest, it wasn't defiance. It was just that I knew for a fact that nothing up there was listening. Then the awakening started, and here's the thing about the order. It goes backwards. The worse your blessing, the sooner it comes out. The first batch lit up within 10 minutes, and the sound that came off those benches was not celebration. Gray grade, bottom. A dozen kids started sobbing at once, and 2 of them jumped their neighbors out of sheer animal grief and had to be frozen where they stood and carried off by the law enforcement disciples. Sima Hui was in the first batch. Gray. She sat there for about 4 seconds while it went through her. Princess, palanquin, chest of gifts, the escort who had already turned around and started walking. And then she stood up on the bench and started screaming that she would kill all of us, and they took her too. Second batch. Better in the sense that they weren't gray, and worse in the sense that the Heavenly Dao clearly writes some of these while drunk. Big Eater. Breath-holding master. One boy got a blessing that made him 2 inches taller. He looked so happy about it. I hope he's fine. Gao Yun lit up in the third batch, which was outer disciple territory, and I heard Gao Ming make a noise behind me like a man being punched in the chest, and when I turned around, he was crying into both hands. Then it got thin. Batch after batch, the numbers dropping, until there were 12 kids left glowing on those benches, with 3,000 people watching them. Wu Lei went at 12. Green grade, aquatic affinity, straight into the inner sect. He stood up, accepted the applause, and walked up those steps with his chin so high I was surprised he could see them. And I thought about the girl who'd been sitting on the other side of Xiaohua an hour ago, on her way home to feed pigs, and about how those 2 had swapped fates on a coin flip neither of them got to see. Then a boy in the last dozen woke up green, too, the bloodthirsty one. He cultivated by drinking blood. An elder on the platform did not stand, did not shout, did not warn him. A bolt of lightning came off that platform and put the kid flat on the flagstones in front of his own mother, and law enforcement had him by both arms before the smoke cleared, and they walked him around the back of the mountain. Nobody objected. Not one person. It's the rule. Evil path. Blessings are put down at the conference, and the family gets compensated, and the compensation is real and generous, and everybody goes home. I stood there and thought, very clearly, I hope Xiaohua doesn't have anything like that. 2 left. One of them was a boy called Jiang Feng, and he woke up blue. Blade and soul possession. The 5 elders on that platform stopped being dignified so fast it was like watching a table of grandparents fight over a baby. 2 of them were on their feet arguing about lineage rights before the light had faded off him. And then a voice cut across the whole square, and it was not loud, and it was the coldest thing I have ever heard. I don't want that one. I want the girl. The 6th elder of the Wind Spirit sect was the youngest elder on that platform, and had been sitting with her eyes closed through the entire ceremony. Xiao Yu. Snow-white robes, a face that looked like it had been carved rather than born, and a reputation as the sect's best in 2 disciplines at once, which is not a thing that happens. The other 4 elders started to argue with her. She drew her sword. It was the middle of summer, it began to snow, and then a wind came off that platform and took 3,000 people off the mountaintop and set them down at the bottom of the steps, gently, all at once, like a hand sweeping crumbs off a table. Which meant that not one single person in the Canglan Cultivation Country got to see what Li Xiaohua's blessing was. Gao Ming found me at the bottom, dazed, still crying about his son, and clapped me on the back hard enough to bruise. "Brother Li," he said, "you have struck gold." I went home to an empty house. I want to describe this properly, because it's the only time in this whole story that I let myself sit in something. I swept the floor with her broom. Then I cooked. 4 dishes and a soup, which is a real dinner, the kind you make when there are guests. I set 5 bowls. 4 of the seats were empty. Then I carried the food into the side room where I kept 3 memorial tablets, Li Wei, Mei Thun, and Li Tie Hu, which was Elder Li's actual name, a fact I learned off a sect roster because he'd never once said it out loud, and I told them. Xiaohua is going into the sect, a real disciple, under an elder. Old man, I kept my promise. Then I went back out, took apart the plank bed, and folded her clothes into a box. Steward Liang showed up that same night. He came through my gate carrying good wine and a storage bag so fat it had a bulge, and he called me Brother Li, and then he got down on his knees on my dirt and started slapping his own face, really doing it. Both hands alternating until his lip split. "I was blind," he said. "I was blind, Brother Li. Whatever you want, anything." Because he had done the math the second he heard, and his math was correct. The man he'd been robbing for 4 years was now the guardian of an elder's personal disciple. I let him finish. I let him think he'd bought it. I poured him a cup of his own wine and told him people make mistakes. Then 3 law enforcement disciples came over my wall and landed in the yard. "I accepted your apology," I told him while they were putting the chains on. "Whether Xiaohua accepts it isn't up to me." They stuck a silencing talisman across his mouth on the way out, which was a mercy, mostly for me. I paid 10 spirit stones to the disciple who stayed behind, and I asked him one question, and I asked it plainly. "Is there any chance he comes back out alive?" "None," he said. 3 days later, it was official. Steward Liang had killed himself in the sect dungeon out of shame. Every one of his enforcers vanished from the district on the same day, which is not something that happens to men who are simply reassigned. Spiritual Field District C threw a party. Not for the sect. Not for anybody. 500 farmers just quietly got drunk in 500 separate courtyards on the same night. I went to Gao Yun's celebration banquet a week after, brought him a stack of talismans as a gift, and got called Uncle Li by a boy about 4 years younger than me, which I have decided to let go. He also offered, very earnestly, to carry letters up the mountain to Xiaohua for me. I told him no, and then I told him why, because he was a good kid and he was about to spend a decade learning it the hard way. "You're an outer disciple," I said. "She's under an elder. Their circle will let you stand near it your whole life, and it will never once let you step over the line. Don't build your happiness on a door that only opens from the other side." He nodded like he understood. He absolutely did not understand. Nobody does at 16, but it needed saying. 2 nights later, I came home, and Xiao Yu was sitting in my courtyard. The strongest elder of the Wind Spirit sect, in my dirt yard, drinking out of my rough porcelain cup, which had a chip in it, and holding it the way you'd hold a live insect. "Your girl's innate blessing," she said, without any greeting at all, "is Nanming Li Fire." I didn't know what that was. "It is the strongest flame in this world," she said. "Gold grade." Gold. Out of 600 children. Out of a district of servants. Out of a girl I'd been teaching to make herself look uglier so nobody would notice her. "You understand," Xiao Yu went on, and here's the part I enjoyed, "that only the dead keep secrets." And she drew her sword while she said it. Then she put it away and admitted, with visible irritation, that Xiaohua had asked her to tell me. That was the entire reason she was sitting in my yard. She had flown down a mountain to run an errand for her own disciple, and she was extremely annoyed about it. Then she got to what she'd actually come for. "I object to your marriage." I said I hadn't proposed one. "You will," she said, "and I object. Not because you're a servant, because that girl looks at you the way a person looks at the only solid ground in the world, and a cultivator who builds her Tao heart on another human being will break the first time that human being is taken away. And in this world, Li Jin, everyone is eventually taken away. Then she made me an offer, and I have to give her credit because it was a fair one. When she forms her golden core, Xiao Yu said, if you are still alive and she still wants you, I will hold the wedding myself. Still alive. She put that in the middle of the sentence like it was a formality. She left me a storage bag on the way out. The sect's reward for raising a gold-grade disciple. 500 spirit stones, a complete foundation establishment technique set, 20 bottles of Wu nourishing pills, and both grades of barrier-breaking pill. About 2,000 spirit stones of value in total, sitting in a bag, handed to a man who 6 years earlier had been beaten out of 70 bushels of rice. I stood in my yard holding it and thought, this is the scene where the mother-in-law slides an envelope across the table and asks you to take 5 million and never call her daughter again. Except she'd also just promised to officiate, which, I'll be honest, made it a much better offer than the ones in the movies. Before she flew off, she offered me 3 doors. Door 1, become an outer disciple. Real status, real resources, real training. I said no. Outer disciples get sent on missions, and missions are how sects convert cheap people into information about dangerous places. I told her, out loud, that I was afraid of dying. She did not enjoy hearing that. Door 2, apprentice under a master of one of the 4 arts. Talismans, alchemy, arrays, artifact refining. Enormous opportunity. I said no to that too, and this one I didn't explain. A master watches his apprentice every day. A man who breaks a minor realm every few months and picks a blessing off a menu each time cannot afford to be watched every day by anyone. Door 3, spiritual field steward. Steward Liang's now extremely vacant job. I took it before she finished the sentence. Xiao Yu sat very still for a moment. I could see her recalculating what kind of person she'd been talking to. You are being offered the road up the mountain, she said, and you are choosing to become a rent collector. Yes, because the rent collector has free time, a salary, a house, and nobody's eyes on him. Because the steward's residence sits on a mid-grade first-order spirit vein, which is better cultivation ground than most outer disciples ever get, and because in a world where standing out gets you killed, the best possible disguise is a small amount of boring, legitimate, publicly visible power. She left looking like a woman who had just watched someone use a sword to open a jar. Then came the naming, and the naming was a fight. Xiao Hua had refused the name her own master gave her, refused an elder, told Xiao Yu to her face that the person who named her was going to be Li Jin or nobody. So Xiao Yu came back down that mountain to collect a name from me, and she spent the entire visit trying to steal the job. Xiao Chenxi, she said, dawnlight, strong, suits her fire. No. Xiao Ling Xiao, rising to the clouds. No. Chen Ling Xiao then, if you're going to be stubborn about the surname. I told her what I actually wanted, and I told her why. That the girl had spent 5 years being a number. That she'd stood on a ridge every evening for a year waiting for people who were not coming back. That whatever else her life turned into, I wanted her name to be a soft thing, because everything else about it had been hard. Xiao Yu went quiet. Then she slapped the table hard enough to crack the teacup. Fine, then I'll name her Chunru Meng, which was, syllable for syllable, the name I had picked. I let her have it. I have never in my life let something go so cheaply. I'd do it again. The woman went home genuinely pleased with herself. I got the name, and as a reward for the name, I got a second-tier low-grade talisman inheritance called the Fate Talisman Profound Records, plus a jade pendant that would let Chunru Meng call for help from anywhere in the country. She thought she was paying me for a name. She was paying me for a road, and she didn't know it yet, and neither did I, not really. Not until I read what was in that book. Up on Lingyun Peak, I'm told, it went like this. 2 senior sisters. Wen Jing, the eldest, gentle in the way that very competent people are gentle, a medicine and poison cultivator. Mei Hua, the second, roughly the size of a 12-year-old, permanently eating something. Xiao Yu presented 3 names and asked her new disciple to choose. Chen Rumeng picked hers in about a second and a half. That one. My heart skipped when I heard it. And then, to a Golden Core elder who had just personally selected her out of 600 children, Li would name me this. Xiao Yu apparently delivered her whole speech at that point, the one about how a cultivator's heart must have no man in it, how attachment is the crack the world puts its fingers into. And Chen Rumeng, 16 years old, one day into the sect, said, Master, you'll understand when you meet someone you like. I would have paid 100 spirit stones to see that woman's face. I went home and counted my money, and I want to walk you through this because this is where I stopped being a farmer. 647 spirit stones of my own, 500 from the sect, 100 out of Steward Liang's apology bag. I split it into 3 storage bags by how rich each bag would make me look if somebody searched me, and I carried the poorest one because the number people see is the number they act on. Then I went shopping in my own head. Barrier-breaking pills come in 2 grades. The low grade costs 50 spirit stones. The top grade costs 500, and what it does is get you across the chasm between the middle and late stages of Wu refining, which is the wall that ends most servants' lives at level 6. 500 stones for 1 pill, 10 times the price for the same wall. I bought it. It's not extravagance, it's the answer key, and I had spent enough years failing exams to know what an answer key is worth. And then I sat down with the Fate Talisman Profound Records, and about 4 pages in, I stopped breathing. Here is what a destiny talisman is. Every cultivator in the world builds their foundation the same way. You take a Wu condensation pill, you compress your energy, you hope. A talisman cultivator has another option. Instead of a pill, he writes a talisman. Not on paper, on himself. On his own soul, in his own consciousness, a human talisman. And if it takes, then at every major realm for the rest of his life, the talisman produces a Heavenly Dao Blessing. Not a random one, not one of 3, a custom one, designed by him, up to gold grade. So why isn't everyone doing it? 2 reasons. The money. 15,000 spirit stones for the cheapest version. 50 to 60,000 for a gold grade one. I had 1,300. And the wall. To write your own destiny talisman, you must already be a 2nd-tier talisman-master before you establish your foundation. But nobody becomes a 2nd-tier talisman-master before foundation establishment, because 2nd-tier work requires more than a Wu-refining cultivator's mind can hold. So the standard path is, establish your foundation first, then learn. And if you do it in that order, the destiny talisman is gone forever. 1 chicken, 1 egg. Several hundred years of talisman cultivators staring at each other. I read that paragraph 3 times, because the thing that stops everyone else is a ceiling on how fast a Wu-refining cultivator can improve. And I was a man who got handed a new blessing every 3 months, so I picked up a brush. I'd like to say the first thing that happened was a triumph. What actually happened was that I got robbed by a man in a shop. The Zhongmen market is 50 miles east, down in a valley, and the first talisman shop I walked into was Song's Talisman Workshop, run by a smiling man called Shopkeeper Wu, whose innate blessing, I did not know this at the time, was a master of deception. Everything he says sounds true, not persuasive, true, like a fact you already knew. He gave me a jade talisman brush for free. He then sold me 200 spirit stones worth of talisman paper, glue ink, and a turtle shell inkstone. I walked out of that shop feeling like the sharpest man in the valley. I got about 40 meters up the street. Then I overheard 2 other talisman makers outside a noodle stall calling that shop a slaughterhouse. I went home. I opened the Fate Talisman Profound Records. I laid every item I'd bought on my table and checked it against the book, line by line, for 4 hours. The paper was defective. The fibers ran the wrong way, which meant a 15% failure penalty. The ink was cut. The inkstone was, and I want to be precise here, a rock. I walked back into that shop at closing time and put it all on his counter, itemized, with the page numbers. Shopkeeper Wu's smile came off like a mask on a hinge. "Do you know," he said, "who stands behind this shop? Deacon Song, of the enforcement team." And I put Xiao Yu's elder token on the counter next to the rock. I have never seen a man's knees hit the floor that fast. He was down before the token stopped rocking. He refunded the 200. Then I sat down in his own VIP room and asked him questions in a friendly voice, and he refunded 600. Triple. Then he told me his blessing. Then he told me that Deacon Song takes 70% of everything he swindles out of servants. Then he explained his pricing system, which is that he looks at your face when you walk in and charges what your face can pay. On my way out, he said something I've never quite gotten over. "For what it's worth," he said, "I liked you better an hour ago, when you were unruly." So did I, Wu. So did I. The second shop was different. His talisman shop sits in the worst location in the market, at the wrong end of a bent street, which is why it was empty at 2 in the afternoon. Behind the counter was a woman in her early 20s named He Mei Ling, drawing a first-tier talisman with a steadiness I could see from the door, and in front of the counter, planted between her and me with his arms out, was her brother, He Tai, 13 years old, all 90 pounds of him. "What do you want?" he said. Because customers kept coming into that shop for reasons that had nothing to do with talismans, and a 13-year-old had appointed himself the wall. I got past him by being pathetic. It's my best skill. "I'm cultivation level 2, I told him. "Look at me. What exactly am I going to do?" He Mei Ling's blessing was patient guidance. She could teach, genuinely teach, raise the comprehension of whoever she was instructing. We agreed on 16 spirit stones for 30 hours. She sat me down and had me practice the figure of the water purification talisman, which is the first one everybody learns. She'd taken 3 hours to draw it correctly the first time. I did it in half an hour. Then she had me attempt a live one, on real paper, with real spiritual energy, and she warned me that she'd needed 20 attempts before her first success. It worked on the first one. She got up and left the room. I sat there, wondering what I'd done. Her brother told me later, cheerfully, that she'd gone out back and stood there for a while and said, to nobody, "He learns so fast it makes me feel like garbage." 10 days. 5 basic talismans, all of them mastered. And with the refund money, I bought a full first-tier, top-grade talisman kit and 2 top high-grade artifacts, a golden light flying blade to kill with, and a golden bell to hide behind. 1 offense, 1 defense. That was the doctrine, and I never changed it. I got to test both of them on the road home, which was lucky, because I'd also built something on my own that I very much wanted to try. The anti-tracking talisman. It's not in any manual. It works like this. You drop child talismans behind you every 500 meters, and you keep the mother talisman in your sleeve, and the mother tells you when something crosses one of the children. 3 miles out of the market, a child lit up. Something was 300 meters behind me and had been for a while, so I picked my ground. Open riverbank, no cover, nothing overhead. I sent the golden light flying blade downstream and low, out of sight, to sit behind me in the water. I put the golden bell up. I palmed 3 talismans and kept walking like a man with 100 spirit stones and no friends. He came out of the tree line in a mask, carrying a mid-grade mace, 3rd level of Wu refining, and he did the thing that they always do. He talked. He explained what was going to happen to me. He explained why. He got, I'd estimate, 11 sentences deep. Then he swung, and the golden bell ate a skull crusher. Then he flanked me, and an earth-profound shield talisman ate the backstab. And then the golden light flying blade came up out of the river behind him and went through his heart and out the top of his skull. And I was disappointed. Genuinely, seriously disappointed. Because I'd bought a 17 spirit stone anti-poison talisman specifically for this, and he had not even thought about poison. 17 stones. Wasted. On a man with no imagination. Then I peeled the human skin mask off his face and stopped feeling clever. It was the simp. I'd seen him that morning in the market, an outer disciple, standing in a shop doorway getting quietly disassembled by his girlfriend, who wanted a mid-grade artifact he could not remotely afford, and who explained to him at length that other men managed it. His name, according to the diary in his storage bag, was Bai Wei. The diary was titled A Happy Record of Bai Wei and Qing. His innate blessing was seeing joy. He saw a number floating over every person's head, showing how much they were worth. And the more he envied the people he looked at, the faster he cultivated. Think about that for a second. The Heavenly Dao looked at a 16-year-old boy and handed him a permanent readout of everyone else's wealth and a cultivation engine that ran on wanting it. He'd been killing rich servants on that road for over a year, every single one of them for a gift. The human skin mask he wore to do it was a present from her, and 3 days before he met me, he'd killed a nervous servant on the same stretch of road who was carrying a Gathering Source exquisite pill worth 300 spirit stones. He put it in a box and never dared open it. It was still in his bag. He'd been saving it. There was one more line in that diary, near the end, and it didn't fit with anything else, and I read it 4 times. Before the arrival of the Tian Dao anomaly, I hope Qing and I can protect ourselves. I had no idea what that was. Nobody in my life had ever said those words. I filed it and moved on, which in hindsight is very funny. I tested the pill on a spirit rat. Caught it, held a knife over it, and explained the two available options, which were die now or be useful. It swelled up, passed out, woke up stronger, and left in a hurry. I ate it. 4th level to 5th level of Wu refining in a single afternoon. 5th blessing, 3 greens. Ingenuity and skill, 10% better artifacts, drug-resistant constitution. Every tier 1 pill I ever took would work as though I'd taken 3. This is the one I wanted. This is the one I still think about. Talisman Spirit Mind. Every successful talisman I made would grant cultivation. I took the 3rd one. Because the 2nd one makes pills better, and pills cost money, and the 3rd one meant that from that day forward, I was cultivating every single hour I was working. The grind and the training became the same activity. Then I burned Baiwei's diary in my yard, which felt like the correct thing to do, and I said a few words over it, since nobody else was going to. You were 16. You got given a blessing that measured other people's happiness, and it turned out the only way to make it grow was to want what they had. And the first thing you did after you learned to hold a sword was go and slaughter for the woman you were trying to keep. I hope Qing never finds out, not for her sake. After that, I ground talismans for months, and I ran it like a business, because that is apparently who I am. 5 talismans. Water purification, 20% return on materials. Dust repelling, 175%. Startle sound, 18. Fire, 16. Anti-tracking, 125%, and by far the hardest thing I could draw. Any sane person makes dust-repelling talismans all day. It's the highest margin and the easiest work. I made anti-tracking talismans. Over and over, at a failure rate that made me want to eat the table. Because the threshold to be certified as a first-tier talisman-master is a 70% success rate on your hardest piece. And I had decided that the fastest way up a mountain is to only ever climb the steep side. Somewhere in there, the sect got tired of waiting for me. A man named Guo Han from the Miscellaneous Affairs Hall came to my courtyard for the 5th time. 8th level of Wu refining. A smile like a tiger deciding. His orders, which he did not tell me but which I could read off his posture, were, do not offend this man under any circumstances, and he clearly could not work out why. Nobody in that hall could. They had a man with an elder's personal backing who had turned down the outer sect and asked to become a rent collector, and the only conclusion available to them was that I must be far more dangerous than I looked, which was true, and for entirely the wrong reasons. He handed over 3 steward's robes, an iron token that said Li Jin, manager of Spiritual Field Area C, a roster of 500 spiritual farmers, the district account book, a key, and a map to a residence 12 miles from the market on a mid-grade, first-order spirit vein. And in the fine print of the account book, I found the number that made me want to dig up a corpse. The sect pays its stewards 0.5% of all collected rent as salary. On my district, that's about 200 spirit stones a year, legally, automatically, for doing the job. Steward Liang had been taking 35% off the top with his own scale and his own thugs, on top of the salary. He had a legitimate 200 stones a year, and he chose to rob 500 families for it anyway, and he did it for years, and the reason he did it is that he could. I sat there with that ledger, and I genuinely considered going to whatever hole they'd put him in and taking a stick to what was left. Instead, I went and dug up a treasure. Elder Lee's map was in my head. The letter was in a 14-year-old's stomach, but I'd read it, and I don't forget things I've been given that expensively. I laid anti-tracking children every 300 meters the entire way, which took most of the night. The hiding place told me everything about the man. It was a cliff edge with clear sightlines in every direction, so nobody could approach it unseen. The tree wasn't marked. The tree was identified by the pattern of the shrubs around it, and the angle the moon came up over the ridge behind it, which meant it could only be found at night by someone who'd been told in a specific season. 10 feet down, a granite slab, a hole under the slab, plastered shut. Inside was a jade slip. I picked it up, and it flashed gold. Not a blessing jade slip, something else. When I pushed my consciousness into it, I saw a meadow, and an evergreen tree, and a golden cicada, and the cicada burrowed down under the roots and stayed there for 34 years, and then came up and split its own golden shell open and left it behind on the bark. Golden cicada shell. A gold-grade destiny talisman method. The Foundation Establishment chapter. One cycle of 34 years, and inside that cycle, one escape from death. Not a healing, not a shield. A hard, absolute, once per 34 years refusal. Li Wei and Mei Fen went 5,000 miles to find their daughter a way out of the mud. They found the single best thing a talisman cultivator can be given in this world, and neither of them lived to learn what it was, and their daughter has no talisman talent at all. So the old man gave it to me. I sat on that cliff at 4 in the morning with it in my hand for a long time. Then I did something that I still think was the smartest move I made that whole year. I gave it to Xiao Yu to read. Partly because it had belonged to Chen Rumeng's family, and she was Chen Rumeng's master, and there is a right way to do things. Mostly because I wanted to see what she'd do with a gold-grade inheritance in her hands. She read it, then she handed it straight back. Her grandfather gave it to you, she said. It's yours. There was real regret in her voice, though. The destiny talisman only works for someone who hasn't established their foundation yet, and she was decades past that, and her own disciple couldn't draw a straight line with a talisman brush. Then she gave me the warning. Do not attempt this before you are a second-tier talisman-master. Attempting it early doesn't fail. It kills you. And then she made me an offer that I did not expect and did not deserve. If you genuinely become a second-tier talisman-master before foundation establishment, she said, I will personally gather the materials for your gold-grade destiny talisman. 50 to 60,000 spirit stones of rare material, from a golden core elder to a rent collector. I asked her why. Because I looked at that road once, she said, and I took the other one. Helping you makes up for it. Then she sat in my yard for 2 hours and poured everything she knew about destiny talismans into my head, including the part nobody had told me, that golden cicada shell isn't the whole thing. It upgrades. At golden core, it becomes the 9-live spirit cat of the present. Beyond that, the cicada of the past reincarnation, and the spirit reflected in the mirror of the future. Present, past, future. 3 ways to not be dead. Somewhere in there I asked her about the line from the diary, the Tian Dao anomaly. She went quiet in a way I hadn't seen before. Every few hundred years, she said, the Heavenly Dao convulses. Calamities. The last one was a century ago. I survived it. I asked how bad. Barely, she said, and then, seeing my face, she added the thing that grown-ups say. If the sky falls, we tall people will hold it up. I said thank you. I did not believe a word of it. Not because I doubted her, but because I had just spent 6 years in a district where 500 families got robbed annually by one fat man, and nobody had held anything up for anybody. That night, I wrote my doctrine down and never revised it. One offense, so good it lands before they arrive. One defense, so good it doesn't need to be perfect. And underneath both of those, the only thing that actually matters. Be very hard to find and impossible to finish. I moved into the new residence at the end of that month. 3 courtyards, pavilions, a pond, all of it Steward Liang's until recently. I carried 3 memorial tablets in myself and put them in the side room facing east. The spirit vein under that house raised my anti-tracking success rate from 25% to 35%, purely from the air I was breathing. That's what a mid-grade first-order vein does. 10 points of skill, free, forever, just for sleeping in the right building. And I had neighbors, which I had not accounted for. The first residence held an old alchemist everyone called Elder Feng, whose innate blessing was oven-fry immunity, meaning his own exploding furnace could not hurt him. I met him on my second day, staggering out of a cloud of black smoke, with his eyebrows gone and most of his beard, cheerfully coughing. The second held Chen Rui, a snake tamer whose blessing made her immune to venom, and who introduced herself by dropping a white jade silver ring snake named Jing Jing onto my shoulder to see what I'd do, and then apologized with a poison-repelling sachet. The fourth held someone who had not left his house in 5 or 6 years and did not answer his door. I left a gift on his step. It sat there until the weather took it. We drank together in the bamboo pavilion, the 3 of us who were visible. Chen Rui got about a jug and a half in and started talking about the 70%. There are still vampires above me, she said, to the pavilion roof. 70%, and the fat one gave me a choice, give in to him, or pay for my safety. Steward Liang, who had also, she mentioned, had a son, and the son had gone after her mother. Nobody said anything for a while. Then we made deals, because that's what you do instead of saying things. Chen Rui sold me top-grade snake-derived talisman paper and ink at 10% off. Elder Feng sold me pills at 20% off. It's the closest thing to a hug that district had. And then I asked Elder Feng the question I'd been carrying around like a stone. Has anyone ever become a second-tier talisman-master during Wu refining? He put his cup down. He'd been alive a long time and had watched 100 talisman cultivators dream this dream out loud and then quit. One man, he said, a few hundred years ago, right here in Canglan. He's the only person on record who ever forged a destiny talisman. And then? Died in a secret realm. But he also gave me the mechanism, which was worth more than the story. First-tier talismans run on spiritual consciousness. Second-tier talismans run on divine consciousness, which is a different substance entirely, and which normally arrives with foundation establishment. A wooden fence, Elder Feng said, cannot hold back a river. So the road was not become a better talisman maker. The road was condensed divine consciousness before foundation establishment, which nobody does, because you can't. I priced the equipment I'd need to even try. A spirit gathering array, 1,200 spirit stones. A defensive array, 1,800. I had 400. I did the arithmetic out loud, which was a mistake because both of those old people immediately offered to lend me 400 each, and I had to go home before I embarrassed myself. The money problem solved itself about 6 days later, which is a phrase I'm using to mean somebody tried to murder me in my bed. I was lying in the dark and I felt the room get wrong, and I made a decision very quickly, which was to keep breathing slowly and pretend to be paralyzed. It worked because assassins want to be understood. She stood over me with a high-grade frost sword and told me who I'd wronged. Outer disciple, innate blessing, stealth at night. And I gave her the line that gets it out of them every time, in a small, scared voice. At least let me die knowing who's killing me. Liang Chun, she said, delighted. My father was the steward of this district, and the golden light flying blade, which I had sent around behind her before she'd finished her first sentence, went through her heart. The villain died from talking too much, I told the room. Watch out for that next time. Her storage bag had 300 spirit stones, a high-grade defensive bracelet, 20-odd talismans, 3 bottles of spirit-gathering pills, and 3 soul-nourishing spirit herbs. It also had a letter from her father, written from a cell, begging her not to come, telling her, in the plainest words a man like that had in him, that they could not afford to touch me, and that she should take the money and go somewhere else and live. She'd kept it. She'd read it, folded it, put it in her bag, and come anyway. The letter also gave directions to a secret room under my own house. Koi necklace, groove in a wall, a click, 4 storage bags, 3,600 spirit stones, 3 second-tier spirit herbs, and a jar of earth milk elixir, which are Wu condensation pill materials, and also destiny talisman materials. And at the bottom of the last bag, a book made of something that was neither metal nor stone. Soul Forging Visualization. Here's what it does. You visualize an anvil inside your own mind, and then you visualize a smith, and then you let him beat your own spiritual consciousness flat, over and over, until the impurities come out of it and what's left is a blade. A Lingxi flying sword, a weapon that ignores armor, ignores shields, ignores flesh, and cuts the soul directly. And it is one of the only known ways to condense divine consciousness before foundation establishment. Total war chest that night, 4,300 spirit stones. Steward Liang robbed 500 families for a decade, hid it under his floor, went to a cell, wrote his daughter a letter telling her to run, and then his daughter carried the map to it into my bedroom and handed me the whole thing while trying to stab me. I read the method properly the next day, and the fine print was as ugly as I expected. The upside, about a 10% better chance at foundation establishment, permanent immunity to mind manipulation, and an improvement to every one of the 4 arts. The downside, if the forging fails, your consciousness collapses and you spend the rest of your life as a man who does not come in out of the rain. The requirement, late-stage Wu refining strength, or, failing that, sheer volume, because it takes 10 pounds of pig iron to make 1 pound of sword, and the hammer is going to throw most of you away. I was at level 5, so I went to see Elder Feng, and I put the 3 soul-nourishing herbs on his table. He looked at them for about 10 seconds and then sat down hard. They were the 3 main ingredients of the soul-nourishing pill, the exact thing you take to survive the forging. He'd been blowing up his furnace for years trying to find substitutes for them, and then he told me why, which he had told nobody. Decades ago, in a fight, something had crippled his spiritual consciousness. That was the wall. That was the entire reason a man of his skill and age had never reached the late stage of Wu refining and never would. We made a deal in about 90 seconds. I supplied the 3 treasures. He supplied the formula, the auxiliary materials, and the labor, and he kept exactly 1 pill. I paid the deposit in advance anyway, because a deal you haven't paid into is a wish. He tried to refuse it. I left it on the table and walked out. The arrays came through one of Chen Rui's contacts, 2,900 spirit stones for a spirit gathering array and a first-tier superior waterwood spirit control array, which is the kind of defensive formation nothing below Foundation establishment can crack. Then I sat inside it for a year and came out at the 6th level of Wu refining. 6th blessing, and this one is my favorite piece of decision-making in the whole story, because I turned down the good card. 10-mile tracking, blue grade. Your attacks lock on and cannot be dodged within 10 miles. A family of talisman-masters. Bloodline grade. All your descendants are born talisman-masters. Arrive in 1,000 miles. White grade. Accumulate small steps now also increases spiritual awareness. 10% per stacked blessing. Blue beats white. Everyone knows blue beats white. Everyone is also not sitting on a stack of 8 acquired blessings and counting. I took the white one, and my spiritual awareness went up 50% on the spot, which put me at what the world would call quasi-late-stage Wu refining, while my aura still read level 2. That was the night I flew for the first time, stood on my own sword, 2 stories up, wobbling like a man on a wet log, moving at roughly the speed of a scooter. It was the greatest moment of my life to that point, and I will not be taking questions. More usefully, I could now control 4 high-grade artifacts at once instead of 1, and I'd hit mid-grade first-tier talisman-master. Elder Feng finished the pills a week later. He'd hoped for 8. He got 5, and the 5th was defective and slightly poisonous. And then, while the 2 of us were standing there looking at them, his adopted son walked in. Luo Tao, outer disciple, very polite mouth, eyes doing something entirely different. He announced, to the room, that a junior sister of his had indicated she would consider becoming his Taoist partner if he brought her a soul-nourishing pill, and the junior sister's name was Qing, the same Qing. The girl who had priced a boy named Bai Wei into a year of murders and then let him wear her present on his face while he did it. She was still going. She was just working a different mine. Luo Tao spent the next few minutes needling me about how convenient it must be, taking the lion's share from an old man. Elder Feng went red to the ears and did not defend himself. Then he gave his son the defective pill, the faintly poisonous one. And I waited until the boy was gone, and I quietly swapped the old man's own share for a good one, so that his 1 pill was a real one, and the loss was mine. He knew. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he told me about Luo Jian, who had been Luo Tao's father, and who had taken the killing blow in a dead cultivator's cave so that Elder Feng could get out of it carrying a 2nd-tier alchemy furnace on his back. Let him hate me, Elder Feng said. I can't watch him sink. I went home and forged a sword out of my own mind. The xianxia pills stacked my spiritual awareness up about 70%, which put a 6th-level cultivator temporarily at 8th-level consciousness. Then I lay down and started the visualization. A faceless giant, an anvil. My own consciousness spread out on it like a glowing sheet. The first hammer blow scattered a piece of me across the inside of my skull. So did the second. So did every one after that. And they got harder, and the sound of it filled up my entire head. Clang, clang, clang. And each time, the soul-nourishing pill worked like flux and pulled the scattered pieces back into the mass instead of letting them burn off. A day and a night of that. Pig iron became refined iron. Refined iron went under 3 smiths and back into the furnace. And at the end of it, something new sat in the middle of my mind and hummed. The sword moves with the heart. Wherever the gaze goes, the sword goes. 200 meters of range, and nothing in the world between here and there matters, because it does not go through armor. It goes through the part of you that is wearing the armor. The change was immediate, and I didn't notice it until Guo Han came back about rent. 8th level of Wu refining. Smiling tiger. He met my eyes across my own courtyard and physically flinched, and then spent the rest of the conversation standing at a slight angle and could not have told you why. His consciousness was stinging, and the man doing it was, on paper, at level 2. Chen Rui elbowed her way into helping me collect the rent, mostly out of nosiness. Her snake, Jing Jing, took one look at me, went straight down her arm and off her shoulder, and left so fast it nearly strangled her on the way. Rent collection week was the strangest thing I have ever done. 500 farmers, 23,000 bushels, and every single one of those people looked at me the way I used to look at Steward Liang. Hands wrong, eyes down, that specific held-breath politeness people use on someone who can take whatever he wants. I took exactly what the book said, not one bushel more in any of the 500 yards. Gao Ming walked the whole route with me, and by the end of it, he was actually ashamed. "Brother Li," he said, "if it were me holding that book, I'd have skimmed 0.5%. Just half. Nobody would ever have known." I know. That's the problem with the job. That's why it exists. I hired him on the spot as district staff, along with his brother Gao Dong and a man named Fang Xiong. 10 spirit stones a year each, which was more than double what Gao Ming made driving that cart. He tried to argue the number down. I want that on the record. The route took us back past the slope where I'd started. The Chen courtyards were still standing, both of them, with weeds 10 feet high growing through the doorways. I didn't go in. The last stop on the route was the valley households, the He, Zhao, Yang, and Wu families. They greeted the new steward with enormous warmth, offered tea, asked after my health, complimented my robes. Nothing about it was wrong. That was what was wrong. Nobody is that pleased to see a rent collector. Here's what they said after I left, which I learned much later. They were Thousand Illusion sect. All of them. Infiltrators with illusion disguises, sitting in a farming district, planning to gradually replace the servants and own the whole grain supply from underneath. Their leader was called Wu Jin, and his opinion of me was that taking me by force was too risky, so the correct approach was to take my mind instead. And there was a second item on his agenda, and it was a name I had never heard. "We also have to recover the soul-forging visualization," he said. "The traitor Han Yang took it when he ran." So that's where my book came from. A defector stole it out of the Thousand Illusion sect, and Steward Liang got hold of it somewhere and hid it under his floor without ever knowing what he had, and it made me a sword. Their first move was a family called Han. Husband, wife, one child, all dead in their own house. He'd killed her, then the child, then himself. No marks on anyone. The whole district was out in the road, and I did not go. I sent the enforcement team, and I stayed home, and I said the true thing out loud so that everyone heard it. Professional matters are for professionals, and I collect rent. Apparently, Wu Jin screamed at his own men about it for an hour. The investigator who came out was a man called Han Fei, one of the 3 who had put chains on Steward Liang, and he closed the case in a day with a verdict so tidy it was almost art. The Joes were petty thieves. The neighbors hated them. There had been a beating over a stolen herb. What killed these people, he told the crowd, was the evil in their own hearts. Then he went home, and I paid the district's condolence money, and nobody asked another question, and that is how you disappear 3 human beings in the Canglan Cultivation Country. I spent the next month at He's Talisman Shop, and it was the only cheerful month in this entire stretch, mostly because Hitai had turned 14 and discovered the concept of teasing. "Li Dog is here," he'd announce, at volume to the whole street. "Sister, sister, Li Dog is here." He Mei Ling would go the color of a lantern and threaten him with a fist she has never once used. My output was 160 talismans a month across 4 types, and all of them sold, and she would not tell me through what channels. I broke through to mid-grade first-tier talisman-master in that shop, and while I was doing that, Wu Jin spent the same month setting up a mountain pass and borrowing a spirit artifact called the Suspended Heavenly Eye. They took me in the pass on the way home. 9 of them, 4 blocking the road ahead, 3 closing from behind, 2 dropping in from the ridge. I put up 4 layers of shielding and turtled, and they took their time, because they had the numbers and they knew it. My 4 high-grade artifacts got stopped. My superior talismans got stopped. Wu Jin stood at a comfortable distance, with the Suspended Heavenly Eye floating over his shoulder, and gave me the speech. "If you'd only been a Wu refining farmer," he said, sounding genuinely regretful, "you'd have had value to me. But you've climbed past what my innate blessing can hold." Which is a fascinating thing to say out loud, if you think about it. He was explaining that I was too competent to be enslaved, and therefore had to be killed. It was almost a compliment. Then I dropped the shields and ran straight at him. I watched his face go from confusion to delight to something else entirely, because at about 4 meters he finally understood what was coming, and he got out 3 words. Spiritual consciousness flee. The Lingxi flying sword went through 3 untouched layers of his defense like they were weather and shredded his mind inside his own skull. He was standing perfectly upright when the lights went out. The other 8 ran. I want to be fair to them. It was the right call. From their side, a level 2 rent collector had just soul-killed an 8th level infiltration specialist through full shielding, and the only 2 questions in their heads were both terrible. Nobody in their sect below Inner Disciple can forge that sword. And where does a servant get the soul-forging visualization? I hunted 5 of them down over the next day and a night, lost 3, burned Wu Jin's body down to ash so nobody could read the cause of death off it, and I took his artifact, which turned out to be the single most useful object I have ever owned. The suspended heavenly eye. A glass eye that flies out on its own and watches a mile in every direction, and a jade plate that shows you everything it sees. The ancients were ancient. They were not stupid. I reported the whole thing to Xiao Yu with about 60% of the truth in it, which is my standard mix. I found a corpse. There was an artifact on it. She named the artifact before I finished describing it, and then she named the enemy, and then she sat me down and gave me the map of the world I was actually living in. Canglan has 5 orthodox sects and 3 demonic ones. Wind Spirit, Moon Shadow, Sword Ripple, Danyang, and Wu Wu on one side. Thousand Illusion, Vajra, and 10,000 Beasts on the other. The Thousand Illusion sect does illusions, disguise, infiltration, and soul devouring. Their signature manual is called The Great Dream Spring and Autumn. And their women, she said, are the most dangerous thing they have. Do not let one of them get you talking. Noted, I said. Then she masked the artifact for me so it couldn't be traced, and took the entire purge of that district onto her own name and never mentioned it again. I sealed myself in Bing residence for a year after that. Somewhere in the middle of it, I hit the wall, the middle to late Wu refining chasm, the one that ends most servants' lives at level 6, and I broke it with the 500-stone barrier-breaking pill and the divine sense sword together, and came out the other side at the late stage of Wu refining. 7 years. Farmhands to a man who could fly. I forged the sword a second time, and it came out able to pierce one target and continue into the one behind, and able to be 2 swords at once, and its range went from 200 meters to 4. 7th blessing. 3 blues this time, which meant the Heavenly Dao was finally taking me seriously. Plundering, take a blessing from someone you kill. Regret is possible. Go back and take a blessing you once refused. 3's company. Gift one of your blessings to a person bound to you by karma. And that menu came with a preview function, which is how I accidentally read Xiao Yu's entire hand. Perfect golden core. Profound yin ice soul, purple. Phantom sword, blue. Phantom layers, purple. Murderous intent, green. And a gold grade additional blessing called divine intervention. And what it says is this: she can never form a nascent soul. She skips it. She goes from golden core directly to deity transformation. That was her prize from the last Tiandao anomaly. That is what she walked out of the snow with. I looked at that for a while. Then I ignored all 3 offered cards' obvious appeal and took 10-mile tracking, the one I'd passed over a level earlier, because regret is possible was not the only way to fix a mistake. Sometimes the menu just comes back around. Attacks lock on and cannot be dodged, which took my soul-killing sword from 400 meters to 10 miles, and paired with a flying eye that scouts one. I had about a month to enjoy that. Then the Thousand Illusion sect came over my wall, 9 again, and this time properly staffed. An inner disciple named Kale, 8th level, shadow manipulation. A tracker whose blessing was scent. A listener whose blessing was wind. And a barrier-breaking talisman only a step below 2nd tier, worth more than my house, which they burned on melting one door-shaped hole in my array. I watched the entire assault from the cellar on a jade plate. Kale was good. He felt the sword coming, actually felt it, 3 seconds out, which nobody had ever done, and he immediately put 2 of his own juniors between it and himself. The sword went around them. His own Lingxi flying sword, which he was very proud of, got cut in half like a length of scrap iron on the way past. 3 dead before anyone in that yard threw a punch. The rest went over the wall faster than they came in. I sat in my cellar looking at my ruined array and said, out loud to nobody, I don't think we can stay on Cuiping Mountain. Then I sent Xiao Yu a message that consisted of 1 sentence. Elder, I don't want to work hard anymore. Which is how I ended up on Lingyun Peak. They were listening at the door when I arrived, all three of them. I could hear them through it. What do you even call him? Master's husband? Uncle? He's not her husband, second senior sister. She's been going down that mountain for 2 years, junior sister. 2 years. Nobody visits a rent collector 11 times unless… Xiao Yu opened the door with her foot and said, "This is my newly accepted disciple." I bowed to my 3 senior sisters. Chen Rumeng fainted. Straight down. Wen Jing caught her. The terms were nominal disciple, not a true one, housed not on the peak itself, but down in Tingfeng Valley, where the sect's core herb garden sits on a 4th-order spirit vein behind a 4th-order formation. Xiao Yu gave 3 reasons, and they were all correct. Because a peak full of women and 1 man is a story. Because Chen Rumeng's Dao heart was the entire thing she'd been trying to protect. And because I needed a job, and gardening is a job. What she did not say out loud, and what Mei Hua worked out inside a week with a piece of paper and a grudge, is that my resource allowance was set at true disciple scale, 5,000 spirit stones a year. I had been making 500 from talismans and thinking I was rich. Mei Hua's conclusion, delivered to my face, arms folded, chin up. Your master's lover and junior sister is the cover story. I want to talk about Mei Hua for a second, because she is the strangest person I have ever met, and I mean that fondly. The first time I hugged her, she launched herself at me. I caught her out of reflex. My arms sank in. She's paper. The secret of origami. Paper doll transformation. The Mei Hua that walked around that mountain talking to people was a folded and painted construct, and she'd been running her whole social life through it for years. And while I was standing there, with my hands in a girl made of paper, I had the single most profitable idea of my life. If a paper doll transformation is driven by spiritual energy, its range is short. What if you drove it with divine consciousness instead? I could scout with it. I could bait with it. I could walk it into a room full of people who wanted me dead and get my head cut off and lose nothing but 1,000 spirit stones of paper. I could, eventually, walk into Baifeng Gorge and find out what actually happened to Li Wei, and do it without ever taking my real body out of a cellar. I bought one from her. 1,000 spirit stones, custom-made, indistinguishable from my real body, full combat capability. She warned me, as she handed it over, that a cultivator at my apparent level could push a doll maybe a few hundred meters. Then she watched me walk it 3 miles. She stared at the horizon for a long moment and said, carefully, that I must have secretly established my foundation. I blamed the suspended heavenly eye. She did not believe me. She let it go, which is her best quality. Wen Jing, my eldest senior sister, is the gentlest person on that mountain, and I want to be extremely clear about what she is. Her innate blessing is the benevolence of a healer, and what it does is raise her comprehension whenever she heals someone. The worse the injury, the bigger the payoff. Which means she needs patience, constantly. Which is why Lingyun Peak has the largest herb gardens in the sect, and why anyone who staggers in half dead gets saved for free, and then gets an itemized bill and a soul contract, and works those gardens until it's paid off. And her foundation establishment blessing is medicine and poison share the same origin. The healing energy she puts into a patient stays in them permanently, and she can turn it into lethal poison with a thought. Everyone she has ever saved is carrying her hand inside their body for the rest of their life. Mei Hua calls her the living Yama, and she calls her that to her face, and then runs. The most heavily wounded man Wen Jing ever saved was a Foundation establishment cultivator named Han Yang, who had been, until recently, a disciple of the Thousand Illusion sect, who had stolen the soul-forging visualization on his way out, and who had dropped it while running for his life through Spiritual Field District C, which is how a fat rent collector ended up with it under his floorboards, which is how I ended up with a sword. He ran because a true disciple of his sect took his childhood sweetheart, and then, for tidiness, tried to have him killed. He also taught me the only reliable counter-infiltration rule there is, and I have used it ever since. A Thousand Illusion agent doesn't just kill you and wear your face, they replace your relatives too, so that anyone who might notice has already been replaced. Appearance, voice, mannerisms, memories, all of it can be copied. The one thing that cannot be duplicated at high grades is an innate blessing. So you don't ask people questions, you ask to see their cards. I saw Chen Rumeng properly for the first time in 2 years about a week later, and Xiao Yu had to be physically shooed out of her own disciple's kitchen. She stood outside in the wind with her back to the door for 2 hours. Chen Rumeng cooked 12 dishes, lychee pork, squirrel mandarin fish, Buddha jumps over the wall, which takes a day and a half. She had learned all of them in 2 years, in a sect, on a mountain, while training under the strongest elder in the country, on the theory that I might eventually show up hungry. Then she talked her master into re-ranking the disciples so that she could be the younger one again, because being my senior sister was apparently unacceptable. And then she gave me a gold thread jade storage bag with 20,000 spirit stones in it. Everything. 2 years of a true disciple's allowance, every pill and consumable she hadn't strictly needed, all of it saved and none of it spent on herself. And buried in the middle of the pile, tucked where nobody but me would find it, a dual cultivation manual. She put a finger to her lips. Life in Tingfeng Valley was, for a while, the good part. A fourth-order spirit vein pushed nearly to fifth by the formation over it. Auto-cultivation jade pendants, true disciple pills by the crate. And I finally worked out what spirit stones are actually for at that level. They're not money. For a true disciple, they are fuel. You sit on a pile of them and burn them into yourself, and my growth rate went up by 1/3 the week I understood that. Also, the herb garden I'd been assigned to tend as a cover job turned out to be quietly full of second-tier materials for a destiny talisman. I took the last soul-nourishing pill and finished the soul-forging visualization. Butterflies 100 feet away dropped out of the air without a mark on them. My spiritual power began liquefying 4 levels ahead of schedule, which is not supposed to be a thing. 8th blessing. A first-class affair. Blue. Cultivation for every doomed romance I personally salvage. The Big Mac. Yin Yang. My body would match my realm perfectly, and my intelligence would be gutted. Distant Echo. Blue. Paper dolls have no distance limit at all. I want to note for the record that the Heavenly Dao had now twice offered me a package labeled Become Enormously Strong, Become Extremely Stupid, and I want to know who that is for. I took Distant Echo. No limit. None. I could put a body in a room 1,000 miles away and walk around in it. Then, while digging my own escape tunnel under the building, I broke through somebody's ceiling, manhwa's, and met the real one, the actual physical manhwa, who comes up to about my chest, and who had spent a decade excavating a labyrinth under Lingyun Peak full of decoy rooms, false corridors, and a wooden contraption she calls the Heavenly Ladder that drops 3,000 feet to the room she actually lives in. Her long-term plan, which she explained to me in complete seriousness while sitting on an overturned bucket, is to make the entire peak mobile so that if things ever go badly, she can run away with the mountain. I gave her a room next to mine, with its own tunnel running in the opposite direction, because, as I explained to her, 2 people escaping in the same direction is 1 target. Then I put 20,000 spirit stones into her labyrinth and puppet operation as an investment. She looked at me with her mouth open and said, "Junior brother has the bearing of an emperor," which is the nicest thing anyone had ever said about my accounting. 2 weeks after that, the sky cracked. Not a storm, not a cloud. The actual sky, all of it, at once, fracturing into a spiderweb from horizon to horizon. And in each shard of it, you could see something that wasn't now, a field that isn't there, a city that isn't built, people walking who aren't alive. Xiao Yu summoned all 4 of us before it stopped moving. "A harbinger," she said. "The Tiandao anomaly is coming." And then she gave us the lecture, and it was the first time I'd heard the whole thing. Every few hundred years, the Heavenly Dao convulses. One of them, long ago, ended with not a single living foundation establishment cultivator left in the entire cultivation world. Every secret realm anyone excavates today, every abandoned cave dwelling full of treasure, that's not ancient wisdom, that's wreckage. Those are houses with the owners still in them. And here's the part that mattered. Surviving it has almost nothing to do with power. It has to do with fit. Whether the blessings you happen to hold, and the techniques you happen to know, and the treasures you happen to own, happen to match whatever shape this particular calamity takes. And this one, Xiao Yu said, is about time. Then she looked at me for a long moment, and did not say the words golden cicada shell, and did not need to. Then she told us about hers. Her anomaly was the ice and snow extreme realm. Snow in July. A cold that didn't touch the skin, it went for the soul. And things living in the white, ice demons that could not die, and that ignored anyone with an ice-aligned blessing and hunted anyone with fire. Her senior sisters went out into it one at a time and did not come back. Her master, a woman called Li Miao, who was a Nascent Soul True Lord, went out to find them. She did not come back either. Xiao Yu held Lingyun Peak alone for 6 months, watching names go dark in a communication talisman one by one, and then she walked out into the snow. Not for opportunity, not for revenge. She went out to find out what they had seen. And at the end of the white, there was a grave. One grave with a headstone as tall as a mountain, and the inscription on it had been written in the bones of dragons and phoenixes, and there were immortals walking into it. Not fighting, not fleeing, throwing themselves in like offerings. Her blessing stopped protecting her there. The demons finally saw her. She fought until every artifact she owned was in pieces and her soul had cracked down the middle, and at the very last instant she reached into the snow and pulled out a sword as if she were pulling it out of herself, and swung. She woke up on Lingyun Peak inside a coffin of ice. 10 years had passed. Between an anomaly and normalcy, she told us, there is a dusk. Years of warning. And in that dusk, historically, the 3 demonic sects come for the 5 orthodox ones. Curfew. All 4 disciples confined to the peak. Manhwa and I agreed instantly and enthusiastically, which I think worried Wenjing more than the sky did. Our real bodies were already in a cellar under a labyrinth. Our public selves were made of paper. Losing one isn't a loss. It's a fishing rod with the hook still in it. 2 months went by, and people did what people do, which is get used to it. The cracks stopped being terror and became weather. Servants would sit out in the evening and point at the pretty ones. Han Yang turned up again and finally showed me his cards, which I'd been angling for since we met. Make a hasty retreat. Green. 50% better at escaping. Alarm bell in the heart. Blue. He senses a lethal outcome before he commits to a plan. He calls himself the Runaway Celestial Venerable, and he is not embarrassed about it. I made a private note that I would very much like to own that second one someday. Walking the intersect in a paper body, I finally learned the ending of the Qing story, and it's ugly all the way down. Her name is Qing. She never wanted the soul-nourishing pill for herself. She worked Luo Tao for it in order to feed it to a man named Chen Lan, Chen Rui's brother, inner sect, arrogant since the day he awakened, who had a soul injury. Luo Tao brought her the defective one, the faintly poisonous one. Chen Lan took it and broke out in erysipelas, and then found Luo Tao and beat him half to death in the outer courtyard. Qing, meanwhile, placed in the top 3 of the sect's 5-year contest entirely on her own merit, and got promoted into the inner sect, and dropped Luo Tao like a bill she'd already paid. I walked past Luo Tao on my way out. He was on the ground at the outer gate, bleeding, staring up the mountain with an expression I recognized, while Gao Yun crouched next to him, trying to find something encouraging to say. I didn't stop. I couldn't have told him anything he'd have heard. The last quiet night in the bamboo pavilion, 3 drinks in, Elder Feng told me the thing he'd been sitting on. Every time the sky cracks, the 3 demonic sects invade the 5 orthodox ones. And it's not opportunism. In the last anomaly, they got hold of a right. Sacrifice enough cultivators and your sect is exempted. The calamity passes over you. Chen Rui nearly went over the pavilion rail. For about 10 seconds, she genuinely believed Elder Feng was one of them. His actual reason for telling me was simpler and sadder. He needed a channel to someone high up who wouldn't charge him for the privilege of being warned. And out of everyone he'd met in 40 years, the person he trusted to carry a message upward for free was a rent collector. He also mentioned, in passing, that Chen Rui would never ask her intersect brother for shelter because having a servant for a sister already embarrassed him. And when I asked whether he wanted me to do anything about Luo Tao, he shook his head. He's no blood of mine. I won't trouble the young man with an old one. I passed the sacrifice theory up to Xiao Yu that night. Her entire reply was 2 words. I understand. The Zhongmen market was down to about 1/3 of its usual traffic when I went back to say goodbye to He Meiling. She'd made first-tier high-grade talisman-master while I was gone. She could draw a Xuanjin sword talisman at a 20% success rate, which for a woman with no backing, no sect resources, and a shop at the wrong end of a bent street is genuinely extraordinary, and the sect had promoted her into the inner sect on the strength of it. I brought her an evergreen spirit fruit. Near 2nd tier, it preserves youth. In the wider world, it sells for a number that makes people sit down. In Tingfeng Valley, it grows like a weed, and manhwa doesn't bother eating them. He Meiling turned it over in her hands for a while, and then gave me her entire advancement record. Every note she'd made climbing to high grade, the whole road, freely Toma, plus a second-tier brush set. She refused payment. She refused it 3 times. Then she told me she was closing the shop and moving into the sect's talisman workshop, and she said one more sentence, looking at the counter. So if you ever come there, even if I'm only a servant, you'll have somewhere to stay. I said thank you and left, and I got about 20 steps up the street before I heard her come out after me. If you don't have anywhere to go, she said, come with me, to the workshop. I told her I already had a safe place. She stood in the middle of the market, holding her own skirt so tightly her knuckles went white, and she did not call out a second time. I don't have a joke for that one. I ground talismans for months after that and made first-tier high-grade myself, and the return rate on my work climbed to 1.5 times my own natural cultivation speed, which means I was now going faster by working than by meditating. And then I did the last step of the soul forging, quenching. Everything I had ever wanted, feared, envied, or hated came flooding into that blade at once, trying to rot it from the inside. Desire, greed, rage, fear, all of it. And the whole design of the technique is that the sword does not resist them. It eats them. What came out the other side was not a Lingxi flying sword anymore. It was a divine sense sword pellet, which meant I had divine consciousness. At the 9th level of Wu refining, before foundation establishment, the impossible prerequisite, the wall that had stopped every talisman cultivator in Canglan for 300 years. The first thing I did with it was close my eyes and discover that I could still see, not with light, in a sphere around my own body, out to a considerable distance, including the actual shape of spiritual energy moving through the air like currents in water. 9th blessing. And the Heavenly Dao, for the first time in its miserly little life, offered me 3 purples. Double casting. Every spell, every talisman, every sword pellet cast twice, with a chance that scales at 10% per blessing I own, up to 100. A heart of sword and a heart of music. My sword strikes would wound the soul. Wrathful Vajra. A random guardian phantom from a higher realm, summoned when I'm in danger. I took double casting, because the second card duplicated something I could already do, and the third card was a lottery ticket, and because I had a lot of blessings, and the chance was going to keep climbing every time I broke a level. I tested it in the valley. 2 spirit wood arrows instead of 1. They plowed a trench a meter wide and 500 feet long, and turned a boulder at the end of it into gravel. And I stood there, looking at that trench, and thought, 2 consecutive divine sense sword pellets would be too much for a foundation establishment cultivator to survive. I want to end the quiet part properly, so here is the last good afternoon. Rain. Mei Hua and me sitting under the eaves, with our feet out in it, watching the cracks in the sky, which had gotten wider. She asked me what the outside world looked like. She'd never been out. Not once. Born into the sect, raised on the peak, a decade in a hole under it. A house cat at a window with very strong opinions about birds. I told her that if the sky came down and even Master couldn't hold it, she should run, and keep running, and not look back for anybody. She said, no. Just that. No. And then she changed the subject, and started telling me the family secret. Something about Wen Jing's ancestors being imperial physicians, and about how that made her somehow a blood relation of Xiao Yu, and Wen Jing came around the corner at exactly that moment, smiling, holding a tray. The 3 demonic sects came a week later. The 4th Order array over Tingfeng Valley cracked like an eggshell dropped on a floor. Not breached, cracked from the inside. Every formation in the entire Wind Spirit sect went down at the same instant, and Wen Jing was standing outside my wards. Except she wasn't smiling like Wen Jing. She let the face come off in front of me, deliberately, and underneath was a woman named Li Shang, early foundation establishment, Thousand Illusion sect. Here's how she got in. She let herself be found half dead. She let the real Wen Jing save her. She signed the soul contract and worked the herb gardens like everyone else and paid her bill off honestly over months. And the entire point of all of it was to be a person on that mountain that nobody looked at twice. She had 1 mid-foundation, 2 early foundation, and 10 late Wu refining cultivators with her, all of them wearing the faces of herb garden servants I'd worked beside. And she had orders, which she read out, because they were proud of them. Take Li Jin alive. He's the hostage that makes Xiao Yu stand still. I logged out of the paper body. Down in the cellar, my real body opened its eyes, kicked the walls of the room out, and picked up manhwa, the small one, the real one, under one arm, and ran. Her escape tunnel was passable for exactly one reason. The great array had fallen, and with it, the pressure that normally makes that rock unworkable. She had spent 10 years digging a tunnel that only became a road on the day the sect died. We covered dozens of miles in a quarter of an hour. Xiao Yu's message came through while we were still underground. Run. Then, 30 seconds later, it isn't only the 1,000 Illusion sect. The Vajra sect and the 10,000 Beasts sect are here as well. The fourth elder of Fu Zhen Peak has betrayed us. The fourth elder. The man who had built the sect's grand formation. The man who maintained it. The man whose entire life's work was the wall. We came up out of an underground river 300 miles out and looked back. 7 peaks stood on that horizon, like 7 swords driven into the ground, and all 7 of them were burning. On one of them, sheets of snow-white sword light kept going up against 4 or 5 separate opponents at once, over and over, refusing to stop. On the main peak, there was a sun of golden light, and around it a tide of black, and the tide was winning. Mei Hua, who had never in her life been more than a mile from that mountain, put her face into my chest and said the truest sentence anyone said that year. If the sect is gone, if Master is gone, I don't know what to do. I didn't answer because I didn't have one, and because the correct thing to do at that moment was walk. So we walked. We walked through the mortal world on purpose because the mortal world has no spiritual energy in it. A cultivator crossing it leaks power the whole way and gets nothing back, so no immortal goes there if there's any other road. I had no problem with it. I grew up down there. Orphan, kitchen boy in a county town, followed a rich family up a mountain one day and never came back down. We traveled as a middle-aged scholar, his young wife, and their comatose daughter in a cart. 2 of us. 3 people. The daughter was paper, and so was the wife, and by the 3rd province we had become a genuine legend in the martial world, the devoted couple carrying their dying girl from doctor to doctor, refusing to give up. People fed us for free. A bandit chief personally escorted us across his own territory and wept. The great Xia dynasty was 30 provinces wide and coming apart at every seam. Famine, refugees on every road, rebels who became bandits, government troops who made more bandits, and in 3 separate villages, people eating things that people should not eat. Meihua started that journey determined to save all of it. She was bitten twice by people she'd fed. She got quieter each province, and by the time we saw the capital walls, she had stopped trying to fix things and started watching them instead, with the same little girl's face and none of the same eyes behind it. We were in an inn on the 3rd floor of the capital when I saw Qing walk down the street. Not with Wind Spirit disciples, with Moon Shadow sect disciples, wearing their colors, being deferred to. And one of her juniors said something in a carrying voice about how lucky she'd been, how an elder had warned her in advance to get out of the Wind Spirit sect before it happened. The Wind Spirit disciples, he added, were all wiped out 2 months ago. I put down my cup and did the arithmetic in about 4 seconds and did not like the answer. Qing was never a Wind Spirit disciple. She was a Moon Shadow sect plant, placed years in advance. Which means the Moon Shadow sect knew the invasion was coming. Which means at least one of the 5 orthodox sects sat on that knowledge and pulled its own asset out and let a brother sect be slaughtered. And once you have that thought, you cannot stop having the next one. The demonic sects want to survive the Tiandao anomaly by sacrificing a sect. Why would the righteous ones want anything different? So we took her. The abduction went through the Great Xia Imperial Palace, because that is where she was staying. Some arrangement between the Moon Shadow sect and the throne that I never bothered to untangle. We went in as a eunuch called Liang and a palace maid, bending the guard's senses as we passed, straight through into the immortal's garden they'd built her. Then I used demon transformation for the 2nd time in my life. 3 meters of bull demon. I went through the wall of that pavilion rather than the door, because doors imply a person. Her thunderfire sword hit my golden light and went off it like a thrown stick. The skull beads and the blood jade knife I'd taken off dead demon cultivators cut off her retreat, which was very much the point of bringing them. Mei Hua's net closed behind. And Zhao Xiaolei, that turned out to be her real name, dropped to her knees, tore her own outer robe off, and offered to serve as a cultivation furnace. Immediately, no negotiation phase. That was her opening move. Meihua's paper face did something I have never seen paper do. I played the part because a demon cultivator who flinches is not a demon cultivator, and I got everything out of her in about 6 minutes because she was trying to talk her way out of a soul search. Her name, that she was the granddaughter of the 7th elder of the Moon Shadow sect. And then, thinking she was buying her life with it, the sentence I had come there for. You're a senior of the 3 demonic sects. You have dealings with my grandfather. We have a cooperative relationship. There it is. Then I reached out to kill her, and she teleported. She'd had it ready the entire time. Every word, every tear, every offer, all of it running on top of an escape she'd prepared before I ever came through the wall. And she used it at the exact moment my hand moved. Her parting line came back to me on the wind. I will find you and grind you to dust. Fair enough. Noted. Meihua didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. My defense was that the entire purpose was to make the Moon Shadow sect believe the demonic sects had done it, which required playing a demon cultivator convincingly, which required not being squeamish. She heard all of it, and then finally told me what was actually wrong. I'm not angry at you, she said. I'm angry at me, for being useless. And once, that same month, without noticing she'd done it, she called me Li, the way Chen Rumeng does. Then she put both hands over her face and would not come out from behind them. Contact came through a month later, from Wen Jing, who was alive. Fallen Moon Immortal City is 100 miles across and sits under a protective array that looks like a night sky with a real moon revolving in it, and nothing below Nascent Soul can scratch it, and reportedly nothing at Nascent Soul can either. We rented a cave dwelling in Onlo Ward for 150 spirit stones a year on a mid-grade second-tier vein, posing as a father and daughter. Meihua cried herself empty in Wen Jing's arms for about an hour, and then Wen Jing explained why she hadn't been on the mountain when it fell. Xiao Yu had sent her out, on an errand, to hunt down the last main materials for my Destiny Talisman Foundation. That errand is the only reason she was alive, and she said it with a small shrug and a smaller smile. As his senior sister, I naturally have to do my part. Then she laid the materials out on a table and told me what was in them. 300-year Azure Sea Dangxia, 500-year Qingjiang Ingluo, 400-year Dragon's Beard Root, 600-year Golden Sandalwood, and 100-flower essence, which is exactly what it sounds like. 100 separate second-tier herbs put through dozens of processes. 30 to 40,000 spirit stones of material, bought quietly over 2 years by a woman who never mentioned it once. So I finally showed them the jade slip. Gold. Golden cicada shell. Meihua's mouth made a shape and stayed that way for a while. I told them I'd be ready to build my foundation in about half a year. Wen Jing said, gently, that it had taken her 15 years. Then she pulled me into her arms, which she had never done, and said into the side of my head, I'm entrusting my junior sister to you. And with your senior sister here, nothing is going to happen to you. The rumors reached the market a few months later, and they were all the same rumor. The Wind Spirit sect is finished, elders dead or crippled, a supreme elder fallen, the sect master gone. Canglan will be 4 sects and 3 gates from now on. There was a table of rogue cultivators in a restaurant laughing about the 4th order spirit veins standing empty up there. The demon sects eat the meat, one of them said, and we drink the soup. Meihua's paper body sat at that window with a cup in its hand and a pleasant expression on its face, and downstairs in a rented cave, her real body was face down in a quilt. Nobody had any news of Xiao Yu. Nobody had any news of Chen Rumeng. What people did have news of, courtesy of a woo-woo sect man who specialized in it, was a scandal. A granddaughter of the Moon Shadow sect's 7th elder, carried off half-naked out of a mortal palace by a demon lord disguised as a 10,000 beasts disciple, who was actually Thousand Illusion. The old man was hunting for revenge in 3 directions at once. I nodded along and said that what the demonic sects got up to among themselves was really none of my business. 4 attempts, 7 hours on the first one. On the 4th, the Frost Star Talisman lifted off my desk on its own, and frost bloomed across the walls of a room in a city where it was summer. 2nd-tier talisman-master, about 100 spirit stones per talisman, and a return rate where 5 hours of work bought 8 hours of cultivation. which means the work had become better than the meditation by a comfortable margin. 9th level of Wu refining, perfected. 9 years since I first picked up a hoe. The chamber took a week to build, spirit stone gathering array, a 2nd-tier spirit wood platform, soul-soothing incense, and 3 top-grade Wu condensation pills that Wenjing refined herself at 3,000 or 4,000 spirit stones apiece, and set beside me without comment in case I changed my mind and did it the normal way. 30 jade boxes on the floor, close to 100,000 spirit stones of material. A standard foundation establishment costs about 5,000. Here is what building a destiny talisman is. Your body is the paper. Your meridians are the strokes of the rune. Your divine consciousness is the brush. Your spiritual power is the ink. And the 30 treasures burn down into a bridge of life that you throw across the gap at the great Tao itself. Every stroke has to be flawless. Not most, every one. Because you are writing directly to the thing that runs the universe, and it does not correct spelling. It responds. It took 4 months, and around me that whole time, the chamber stopped being a chamber. There was the smell of turned soil, leaves moving, warm sun on bark, an egg, then a nymph, then a shell, then a thing crawling up the trunk of an evergreen in the dark. Eggs, and then underground, and then 34 years, and then up the tree again. The cicada climbed and split its own golden shell open along the back and left it behind. And my consciousness went down into the empty shell and back under the ground. There was no pillar of light, no thunder, no heavenly phenomenon at all. Just cicadas, very loud, for a long moment. And then silence. The foundation was done. The first thing I did afterward was let my aura out on purpose, so the entire ward could feel a perfectly ordinary foundation establishment cultivator sitting in a rented cave. 9 years of hiding my level, and the day I finally had a level worth hiding, the best disguise available was the truth. Then the destiny talisman paid out for the first time. 3 acquired blessings. All 3 of them gold. Come with me. Whoever kills you dies with you. No exceptions, no escape, no distance. Time reversal. If you die and are reborn, you revert to a random earlier point in time. The 5 paths of reincarnation. When you die, you come back as one of 5 kinds of creature, inheriting the full talents of that bloodline. 9 years earlier, I had been offered a blessing that let me slap someone from 10 meters away. I banked the choice. There's no deadline until the next breakthrough, and I had learned by then that the most valuable thing on any menu is the option you haven't spent. The new body took getting used to. Divine sense out to 300 feet. Manhwas, at the same stage, reached 100, which I mentioned once and then had to spend a week apologizing for. Flight without a sword under my feet. Spiritual energy that had gone from gas to liquid, and regeneration. Foundation establishment cultivators with a wood attribute technique regrow severed limbs. Which is why, in this world, the only 2 reliable ways to kill one are the skull and the mind, and why everyone with any sense builds toward consciousness attacks eventually, and why a man who had been building nothing else for 9 years was in a very good position. And Golden Cicada Shell finally showed me its foundation establishment text. After a fatal injury, instantly flee 1,000 miles and regenerate completely from a single drop of blood. Not a second life that nobody can stand over and wait for. The congratulation crowd came the next day, because in a city like that, a new foundation establishment cultivator is a market event. Gifts from a talisman workshop called Qing He, run by a family named He, which made me stand in my own doorway for a moment wondering about 2 siblings in a shop at the wrong end of a bent street. And in the back of the crowd, undisguised, smiling at me, was Elder Feng. At Middle Foundation Establishment, the old alchemist from the courtyard next to mine. 6th level of Wu refining for as long as I'd known him. The man who told me to my face that a crippled spiritual consciousness would keep him below the late stage forever. He was standing in Fallen Moon Immortal City, 2 full realms above where he should have been, and he nodded at me like a man who has been enjoying a joke for a long time. We took cover identities. Li Guang, Li Rong, and Li Yun. 3 siblings. 3 foundation establishment cultivators, which in that city is an actual small power. Mei Hua loathed hers. Li Yun, she kept saying. It sounds like expired ginger. And then the offers started, and they told me more about the coming apocalypse than anything else did. Fallen Moon Immortal City is run by the Shu family. The head of it, Shu Long, is a late Golden Core cultivator, and he has 3 heirs who matter: the eldest young master, Shu Sheng, the 4th young master, and the 6th miss. The eldest sent a man called Fang Jian, who sold fear for 20 minutes and then sold protection from it, and then leaned in on his way out and stage whispered that of course we should shop around, but his master paid best. The 4th sent a Taoist called Qing Song, whose pitch included, as a demonstration of his master's power, the claim that the 4th young master could cure the 6th miss's disfigured face during the Tiandao anomaly. And there it was again. Both of them, in different words, promised the same impossible thing. We can shelter you from the anomaly. Which means both of those brothers were already plugged into somebody's sacrifice, and had been for a while, and were shopping for muscle to survive their own family with. Then, a woman named Chai Ning arrived on behalf of the 6th miss, Shu Li, and made no offer at all. Except neither of them, she said, Miss will handle the consequences. When Jing publicly handed the decision to me in front of all 3 recruiters, which was a kindness disguised as laziness. He came up from nothing, he'll judge it better than I would. We declined both brothers. The eldest is domineering, the 4th is desperate, and desperate men do arithmetic that includes you. The 6th miss is the one who could afford to send an envoy with no bribe in her hands, which means she is the favorite, which means she is the one who can stop the other 2. Half a year went by, and the cracks in the sky went from spider silk to hemp rope. Then Wen Jing moved back to her own cave, and then she sent one message. I've had word of master and junior sister. I'm going alone to confirm it. By the time we got to her cave, she'd been gone 6 hours. Manhua locked herself in a room and ground paper doll research for 2 weeks straight so she wouldn't have to sit still. I went and cornered Elder Feng, and this time he didn't get to leave. He confirmed all of it. The 4th Elder's betrayal took the arrays down from inside. The Supreme Elder, a late-stage nascent soul, died holding 3 nascent souls at once. The sect master fought covering the retreat and is presumed dead. The rest scattered. And the sacrifice was not the disciples. The sacrifice was the elders. Nascent soul and golden core. Body, soul, and consciousness kept and tormented indefinitely, because that is what the rite is made of. Not killed, kept. Chen Rui went in, with her snakes, straight up the mountain into it, to try to get to a brother who had spent his entire adult life being embarrassed that she existed. Luo Tao took the 10,000 Beasts sect's beast transformation pill. Voluntarily, in front of Elder Feng, who watched him do it and could not stop him, and what walked away afterward was, in the old man's words, neither human nor ghost. He asked me, very steadily, that if I ever met him, I put him down, and Zhao Yu was still fighting when the last person saw her. On Lingyun Peak. At the peak of Golden Core, against 4, and turning the fight. Buying time, which meant somebody was in seclusion behind her. Then I asked Elder Feng the question about his own cultivation. He laughed it off, and while he was laughing it off, he looked up at the shards of broken sky, at the images sliding across them, and he named one of them without thinking about it. That, he said, is the fall of the Canglan Immortal Court. An empire that has been dead for tens of thousands of years. He caught himself and made a joke, and I let him have it. His parting advice was practical and correct. This city will not be abandoned the way the sect was. Bring Zhao Yu here, and stay close to the 6th miss. I found Mei Hua in a room that smelled like a room somebody hadn't left. Hair unwashed, 40 failed paper dolls on the floor. I'm useless, she said, to the wall. That's why senior sister didn't take me. So I picked her up by the armpits and spun her. She's about the weight of a large cat. I spun her in a circle until her feet came off the ground and her hair went horizontal, and she screamed once in outrage and then started demanding I go faster, and by the 4th rotation, she was laughing so hard she had the hiccups. Then I sat her down and combed her hair out and braided it, which took an hour because it had reached the state hair reaches. Junior brother, she said, from somewhere under all of it, you've made up for the childhood I never got to have. I told her I was going out to find Wen Jing and Chen Rumeng. I also told her I'd be going as a paper doll, and she believed me and threw herself into 2 months of the best work of her life, building me a Foundation Establishment grade doll, a middle-aged scholar, indistinguishable, full combat capacity. I spent another 7 or 8,000 spirit stones equipping it. Then Chai Ning came back with a memory bead, and everything moved at once. The bead showed Wen Jing cornered by a woman she'd called sister, who had already sold her, and who was standing there, explaining the terms out loud like they were reasonable. Betray 1 or 2 juniors as a pledge of loyalty. Maybe they'll let you live. And Wen Jing, the gentlest person on that mountain, the one who bills people and braids hair and calls everyone junior sister, said, "It's nothing more than death." Then she burned a black token and vanished into a Heavenly Dao secret realm called Death Choice. Nobody has ever come out of Death Choice, not one person. A Nascent Soul True Lord who entered it did not come out. Only 2 of those tokens exist at any one time. Chai Ning put the second one on the table in front of me, and she asked me a question, and I have thought about the way she phrased it many times since. She chose to die a heroic death, she said. What would you choose? I left the paper doll sitting in my chair pretending to be me, so manhwa wouldn't worry, and walked out in my own body. She worked it out inside an hour. She told me afterward exactly how, and it broke my heart a little. How could my own paper doll ever fool me, she said. You went in your body. Which means you already knew you were going to have to spend the golden cicada shell. I landed in Death Choice with my head in Wenjing's lap, which is, I'd like to point out, the only way I was ever going to get a lap pillow out of my aloof eldest senior sister, so, on balance, the trip was already worth it. She'd been sitting in that chamber alone for over a month, not trapped, not injured, just unable to choose, because in front of her were 2 bronze doors, identical in every particular, and on the wall between them, a stone tablet that said, "First challenge, the gate of life and death. One is life, one is death." No clue, no inscription, no mechanism to examine, no seam to exploit, nothing to weigh. A coin. She'd spent a month looking for the trick, because she is a careful person, and there wasn't one, and so she had sat down. She insisted on going first, absolutely insisted, in that soft voice she uses when she has stopped negotiating. I overruled her by quoting her own house rule back at her. Men take charge outside. Your words, senior sister. Then I walked through the right-hand door. What was behind it was falling stars, a coastline going underwater, mountains that were made of bodies, and at the end of all of it, an old man kneeling alone in a field of graves with nobody left to bury. The death path. First try. And I'll be honest, my reaction was mostly logistical. Golden cicada shell would fire, I'd be thrown 1,000 miles, I'd regenerate, and the 34-year cooldown would start, and I began mentally rescheduling the next 3 decades of my life around it. Then I looked back. Wen Jing was standing behind me. She had followed me through the death door about 2 seconds after it closed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I still came, just like you." I reached my hand back, she took it, and the corpse mountains turned into blossom. The drowning coast became a shoreline in spring. The old man in the graveyard became a man coming home along a road, and the whole vision ran forward into a full life lived to the end of it, warm, unremarkable, complete. The doors were identical because the doors were never the question. Alone is death, together is life. That's the whole test. And the clue was on the table the entire time, in the shape of the tokens themselves. They only ever come in pairs. There were 2 jade platforms on the other side, carved with dragons and phoenixes, and each one had a name on it, hers and mine. 2 rewards offered. A 4th-tier superior skill inheritance, or a superior nascent soul grade cultivation technique. Everyone takes the technique. The technique is power, and it is power right now, and it carries you to a realm most people never see. I took the inheritance, the xianxia secret canon, a 4th-tier superior talisman inheritance, the kind of thing a sect keeps on the 4th floor of a scripture pavilion and shows to nobody below true disciple, and there are entire sects in Canglan that don't have one. My divine sense had doubled at Foundation Establishment, and it still could not hold the whole thing in one piece. We took the second stela the next day, and I want you to appreciate the joke the Heavenly Dao was making, because I certainly did. Second stage. Sacrifice and reincarnation. The 4 heavenly gates. 4 altars. Pay one of them. Your lifespan. Your kin. Become a lone star. Walk alone forever. Everyone who matters to you removed. Your Dao. Become immortal. Permanently. Immediately. Or yourself. Become a walking corpse. A puppet. For 10,000 years. Wen Jing went very still. Because she'd already done this arithmetic once at the doors, and she'd already picked her answer, and I could see her picking it again. So before she could move, I showed her the gold-grade blessing I had banked and never spent. Time reversal. If I die and come back, I revert to a random earlier point in time. Then I put my palm on the lifespan altar. Aging is not slow when a Heavenly Dao secret realm does it. My hair went in about 40 seconds. My hands went. Wen Jing had me by the shoulder, screaming at me to let go, actually screaming, which I had never heard from her, and I could not have let go if I'd wanted to. 250 years of lifespan ran out in a dozen breaths, and what fell down beside that altar was a husk. She held the body. She blamed herself. She said several things to a corpse that she has no memory of saying, and then she reached out for the altar herself to follow me, and a young man caught her wrist. She turned around and I was standing next to her, 20-something, whole, and around us on the floor of that chamber lay more than a dozen identical, withered corpses, all of them wearing my face. Here is the exploit, and it is the single best thing I have ever done. The altar accelerates time on the person touching it. Golden cicada shell has a 34-year cooldown, so the altar cooks the cooldown too. Every time it burns 34 years off my lifespan, it also finishes charging the thing that brings me back, which means the shell is always ready before the old age kills me, which means I can die on that altar as many times as it takes. I died of old age 5 times. I fed that altar somewhere close to 1,000 years. And then, because dying 5 times of old age is unpleasant enough that I wanted the balance to be exactly 0, I used time reversal about 10 more times and rewound the whole sequence, and finished the second stage having paid the Heavenly Dao not one single day. The Heavenly Dao has no loopholes. It has mechanisms. That's all a loophole ever is, a mechanism used by someone who read it more carefully than the person who wrote it. There's one part of that I don't talk about. Wen Jing remembers none of it. Not the screaming, not the corpse, not any of the things she said out loud in the timelines I erased. I remember all of them. Between the second stage and the third, there was a rainbow bridge over a sea of cloud, and I told her I walked across it, which is true. What I left out is that every 100 steps of that bridge was another lethal choice, and it was 10,000 steps long, and I died 23 times on it. Every single one of those deaths meant walking all the way back to the lifespan altar to burn the cooldown off the shell before I could try the next 100 steps. It's a video game, is what it is. You can die 1,000 times. The boss only has to die once, which was fine right up until the altar was behind us and gone, and I did the sum I'd been avoiding. 1 time reversal left. 1. The rewards for clearing the second stage were all blessing related, which told me the realm had been reading me the whole time. A random purple blessing jade slip, or an upgrade of any blessing I owned to purple, or a reroll of my innate blessing at a guaranteed blue, or the heavenly scripture. A treasure that strips the downside off a yin-yang blessing. 3 uses. Everyone else takes one of the first 3 because those are power today. I took the heavenly scripture because it's the only one of the 4 you can put in a bag and spend later, and by that point in my life I had a very firm policy about options. Wen Jing took Xuanyin female body, purple, and would not tell me what it did. Then the third steely lit up. Final stage, 8 gates rebirth. A hall the size of a city ringed with hundreds of gods carved in stone, and in the middle of it, 8 doors, and one of them is the gate of life. Open, rest, life, injury, block, view, death, shock. Walk the gate of life. Then the hall resets and you do it again, 8 times running. Wen Jing said quietly, 1 in 64. I said no. 1 in 64 is if you get 2 tries. 8 correct choices out of 8 doors in a row is 1 in 16,777,216. So we moved in. There's a temple in that hall full of stone idols, and we ate hot pot in it. We slept there. We cultivated there. And here is the part that mattered mechanically. 2 divine senses can merge and cultivate together, spirit and consciousness, and it doubles the rate for both. 3 hours a day is the physical ceiling for it, and we hit that ceiling every day for a long time. I set one condition before any of it, out loud, on the first day. I am going to tell Chen Rumeng everything. All of it, in order, the moment I see her. Wen Jing offered to take the blame, to say it had been her idea, her insistence, her fault. I told her no, and I told her why. Ducking it would not protect Chen Rumeng from anything. It would just mean that the first thing I ever hid from her was the thing I hid to protect myself. I broke through to the second layer of foundation establishment in that hall, and the menu came up. Reversed dual cultivation, yin-yang, double efficiency, gender flips. It has now offered me this twice. I have questions about the Heavenly Dao's sense of humor. Divide and you shall receive. Blue and upgradable, control your body and an avatar simultaneously. Guidance from spirits and deities, yin-yang. You can show anyone the way out of any predicament. Price. You become a bound spirit who can never leave. I took the third one and immediately spent one of my 3 charges of the heavenly scripture on it. The downside came off. The blessing rewrote itself. Immortal guides the way, purple. Show anyone the way out of a predicament. It works on other people. It has never once worked on me. 2 charges left, and a blessing that could solve any maze in the world for someone standing next to me. I told Wen Jing I'd found our way out, and she believed me instantly, without asking how, which annoyed me so much I had to say something about it. For the first trial, I said, you promised to let me go first and then followed me through a death door anyway. For the second, you held my withered corpse and tried to kill yourself on an altar. My senior sister has never believed in my abilities. This makes me very sad. She went pink and refused to look at me for an hour. Then she walked in front of me through the 8 gates while I called the turns, because the blessing does not work on the person using it. East, northwest, south, southeast, southwest, north, west, southwest. 8 for 8. And each gate, as you go through it, plays a life. Hers went from a physician's daughter in a walled garden to a girl at a zither she didn't want to play to a road up a mountain. Mine played Earth. 20-odd years of school and work and a commute. A death that took about 4 seconds and which I still don't remember properly. A soul falling into a womb in a world with mountains full of fire. An orphan. An old man who lived alone and raised me and died badly. A restaurant kitchen. A road up a mountain. I have never talked about any of that to anyone. It played it in front of my senior sister at full size, and she never once asked me a question about it, which I think is the single kindest thing anyone has ever done for me. 8 gold rewards on the other side. 1 word each. Formation, pill, item, token, beast, law, life, land. I ruled out 5 immediately. Wen Jing took beast and got an egg the size of a rice bowl with a shell like frosted glass, and she turned around and tried to give it to me before she'd even finished picking it up. I pushed it back into her hands. Only a foolish senior sister needs a spirit beast to guard her, I said. So raise it, and I'll borrow it when I need it. I took life. And the system paused and then informed me that the top prize on that platform, resurrect once after death, duplicated something I already owned, and therefore it would substitute. The Jade Book of Creation. A destiny talisman lineage that deduces your next chapter for you. It derived the core formation chapter of Golden Cicada Shell on the spot. Materials, method, warnings, every step of it delivered whole into my head. 3 treasures out of a secret realm nobody has ever walked out of. Wen Jing tried to leave alone. I caught her by the shoulders from behind while she was standing at the exit point being noble about it. Her logic was that if there was an ambush waiting at the mouth of the realm, only one of us needed to be in it. I knew it, I said. Senior sister is still disobedient. I came prepared. Then I spent a use of Immortal Guides the Way on the exit itself, which the realm had absolutely not intended, and it worked, and we came out of Death Choice together, standing in a rented cave in Anlai Ward, holding each other, in front of manhwa. She stood there with a bowl in her hand, trying to reconcile the eldest senior sister who does not speak to men except to take their pulse with what was directly in front of her eyes. I diffused it by having Wen Jing produce the spirit beast egg, holding it up and announcing with a completely straight face, "We disappeared for 2 months to lay an egg." Then I told her the truth. All of it, in order, downplaying my own part enough that she'd sleep. Let me total the trip, because that's what I do. Gone for months. 3 trials of a realm with no survivors. Out the other side with the Xuantian secret canon, the heavenly scripture, and the Jade Book of Creation. A dual cultivation method that more than replaced the blessing I'd outgrown. 1 senior sister recovered intact. 1 debt owed to the 6th miss of the Shu family. And 1 debt to collect. I also stopped using the concealing breath technique that week. 9 years of reading as level 2, and I put it away because the calculation had finally flipped. Being underestimated is only useful while you're too weak to be worth hitting. Accumulate small steps had reached 10 stacked layers by then. My spiritual strength was around 3 times a normal Foundation establishment cultivator's. The debt came due about a month later, and her name was xianxia. But before that, I had an audience to attend, and I want to describe it, because it's where I met the person this whole city eventually belonged to. Cai Ning collected me in a disguised carriage and served second-tier tea called Spiritual Snake Welcoming Spring, which costs 100 spirit stones an ounce, in a moving vehicle on a bumpy road without spilling any. Halfway there, the carriage stopped. The 4th young master, Xu Hao, was standing in the road. Slim, bookish, beautifully mannered, apologizing for the delay before anyone had complained about it. He spent 4 minutes on courtesies and then, in front of me, offered Cai Ning a second-tier zither manual as a personal gift, and explained at some length how much better her talents would be appreciated elsewhere. She thanked him, declined, and we drove on. Then she picked up the tea again and gave me her assessment in 1 flat sentence. 6th Miss describes him as a beast in human clothing, a degenerate scoundrel. Canglan residence has a gate inlaid with pearl. Behind the gate, where a garden should be, there is an arena. A dozen iron cages of second-tier demon beasts around the edge. Sand. And in the middle of it, standing on the split skull of a tiger demon the size of a house, in silver armor with blood on it, was Tong Yun. Ponytail down her back, spear in one hand. Everyone in that city had told me the 6th Miss was the strategist, the clever one, the favorite because she was subtle. She wasn't a strategist. She was a general, and she'd been letting people believe otherwise because it's cheaper. The banquet was in a pavilion in the middle of a lake. She came in late, drank 3 cups as a forfeit before she sat down, told me to stop calling her Miss, and then asked me 11 consecutive questions about what was inside Death Choice until Cai Ning pinched her under the table. Then she put the terms on the table, and I liked them, because they were 4 sentences long, and none of them were flattering. I helped you. In the future, you will help me. Whatever the difficulty is, I'll do my best. That's all. I asked for one thing. Everything she had on the woman who sold my senior sister. She offered me men to go with me. Golden Core support, a squad, whatever I wanted. I turned it down, and I'll tell you what I told her. Revenge that you hand to someone else isn't revenge. It's an errand. On my way out, I met the eldest young master, Xu Sheng. Foundation establishment complete, preparing for his core formation, and I disliked him within 9 seconds, which may be a personal record. He talked over Cai Ning twice. He clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to be a message, and on his way down the corridor, not quite out of earshot, he explained to his own retainer what his sister was. A serving girl's daughter who thinks she can covet the city lord's seat. In the end, just a woman to be married off. Cai Ning's counterportrait, once he was gone, was 3 words long, a tiger drawn on paper. And then she told me something about the token, and I have never forgotten it. Tong Yun's original plan had been to hand me a fake one, a convincing forgery. It was a test. Would this stranger actually burn his life on a realm with no survivors for a woman he called senior sister, or would he take the token and quietly not use it? Cai Ning talked her out of it. And then went and paid a genuine fortune for a real one, from the only place real ones exist. Her argument was the coldest, cleanest thing I heard that entire year. We don't need people who are loyal. We need people who are useful, and using a fake wins no hearts. They bet on odds of 0 and 1. Xianxia was Wen Jing's cousin. They grew up together in Pingshan City in the mortal kingdom of Great Chu. The Yang family had connections to the throne. The Mo family was a branch clan of physicians who served them. 2 girls in the same courtyard, and they made each other a promise the way girls do. Wen Jing was going to be an imperial physician, and Xianxia was going to be an empress. Then Wen Jing's parents sent her up the mountain instead, her mother's exact words, which Wen Jing repeated to me once and never again. Your mother doesn't want you trapped in the cage of wife and mother. Xianxia followed her. Same road, same day. She awakened white, a skilled embroiderer. And she was fine, honestly. She had already packed. She was going to go home, marry into the court, live 140 comfortable years as the highest-ranking woman in a mortal city, and she had made her peace with it in about a week. And then she found out Wen Jing had awakened blue and been taken as a true disciple. Her own words, years later, to a man she was drunk in front of. That news hurt 1,000 times more than being killed. So she stayed, and Wen Jing spent the next 16 years quietly trying to fix it. Bought her out of the spirit fields, got her into the alchemy rooms, taught her personally, funded every pill and every technique. Every single one of those kindnesses landed as a victor's pity. 16 years ago, Wen Jing found her broken, genuinely broken, taken apart by evil cultivators on a road, and spent a fortune she didn't have restoring a cultivation base that had no future in it. And then Xianxia found the ladder that actually worked. He Bo of Changyang Mountain Market, who took her as a mistress and then conveniently died and left her everything. Then Tao Kai, the chief cultivator of that market, who also died. Then an arrangement with Xie Ming, a Golden Core elder of the Moon Shadow sect, at which point she owned Changyang Mountain Market outright and was being written about across 3 provinces as the great self-made independent female cultivator of her generation. Wen Jing tried to make excuses for her when we laid it all out. She started with the one everyone starts with. She only ever had servant qualifications. She had nothing. And I said one name, Chen Rui. 20 years a servant, never got past the middle stage of Wu refining and never would. Never sold a single piece of herself to anybody. Made steward on her own merit, in a district where the last steward wanted her and she said no and paid for it for a decade. And when the sky came down on the wind spirit sect, she ran up the mountain, into it, with a bag of snakes, to try to reach a brother who had spent his entire life embarrassed that she existed. A poor background is not an excuse. It's a starting point. What happened after was a choice. Wen Jing didn't say anything. Manhua reached over and took her hand and said, "You're the living Yama, senior sister. You can do this." Green Pine Valley sits 30,000 miles out on the edge of Moon Shadow sect territory on a second-tier superior spirit vein. It used to belong to a family called Long, who took Changyang Mountain Market by exterminating a family called Zhao, and who were themselves slaughtered, 100,000 people, every branch, every child, by a demon cultivator nobody ever identified, who rendered the whole clan down into blood pills. Xie Ming moved into the empty valley afterward, turned it into a medicine garden, and gave it to his mistress as a present. It was protected by a third-order maze array and a second-tier superior azure water spirit array. I walked the maze holding Wen Jing's hand, with immortal guides the way pointing the turns, and it took 11 minutes. Then I melted the second array with a near third-tier barrier-breaking talisman that Tang Yun had sourced for me in 4 days, which is the kind of thing you get for having a friend who commands an actual army. And then I put the suspended heavenly eye through the wall of the banquet hall, and Wen Jing and I stood outside in the dark and watched. There were 5,000 illusion sect cultivators at that table, led by a true disciple called Qi Yuan, late Foundation Establishment. And Xianxia was buying her way through the Tiandao anomaly with everything she had, in a voice I would not want to hear again. She had promised them Wen Jing and failed to deliver her, so she was offering compensation. She was going to lure Wen Jing's 2 junior siblings out instead. Wen Jing's hand went still in mine. Then she walked into that hall in front of 5 people who wanted her dead, smiled, and cast a healing technique on the entire room. Spring breeze and rain. It's a beautiful thing. It closes wounds, settles qi, takes the ache out of old injuries. Qi Yuan actually thanked her for it. He thought she was buying goodwill. He thought she was afraid. Then she flipped it. Medicine and poison share the same origin. Every scrap of healing she had just poured into 5 bodies turned over inside them at once. No incantation, no hand seal, no spell to detect, and nothing to block, because the poison was already inside them, and it had gone in as a gift. Qi Yuan got up anyway. Half crippled, spitting blood, and he was still a 1,000 illusion true disciple, so he raised 3 divine sense sword pellets. 3 is impressive. 3 is more than most golden cores manage. I sent 10. Double casting. From the roof. He blocked 6. He died on the floor of that hall, begging a man he assumed was one of his own sect brothers to spare him, because the only explanation his mind could produce for what had just hit him was betrayal from inside. Xianxia crawled to the door and started kowtowing to it, forehead on the floorboards, begging Xiaming to come and save her. And the figure standing in the dark outside that door was Wenjing. I watched her face do the whole journey. Terror, then hatred, pure and undisguised, for about half a second, and then, faster than anything I have ever seen a human face do, a warm and delighted smile. Sister, aren't we best friends? Didn't you save my life once? Think of your parents. They wouldn't want this. And Wenjing, crying, said, when you're dead, I'll send your ashes home, and I'll tell your family you died at the battle of the Wind Spirit sect. That's all I can do for you. Xianxia triggered a self-destruct talisman and lunged. Nothing happened. Wenjing knocked a corpse to the floor. I'd cut her consciousness in half from the roof, about a second and a half earlier, while she was still smiling. Wenjing wanted to bury them. I said no, and I made her leave every body exactly where it fell, in the open, in the hall, in a valley that belongs to Xiaming, and everyone knows it. Because a Moon Shadow Sect Golden Core Elder's private mistress found dead in his own garden, surrounded by dead Thousand Illusion Sect cultivators, is not a crime scene. It's a rumor. And rumors travel between two sects that already hate each other with no help from me at all. We went through the 5 storage bags afterward like children opening boxes. 20,000 spirit stones, a stack of second-tier talismans, 3 near third-tier ones, which are individually worth more than a house, and 2 things that changed my life. The first was a Heavenly Dao replacement jade slip. It rewrites one acquired blessing you already own. The second was called the Soul Refining and Casting Method, and it was restricted to Thousand Illusion True Disciples, and it is the direct sequel to the Soul Forging Visualization. What it does is turn the Divine Sense sword pellet from ammunition into a battery. Before it, I had 5 shots, and then I was a man standing in a field. After it, the pellet recharges while I fight. 5 sustained blades instead of 5 and empty. I copied both secret methods out by hand and gave them to my senior sisters, which manhwa found so shocking that she asked me twice whether I was feeling well. Techniques like that get hoarded. Whole sects are built on not sharing them. I have 3 people in the world. What exactly am I hoarding it against? Wenjing confiscated Meihua's share of the 20,000 spirit stones for safekeeping, on no stated grounds, out of what I am fairly certain was pure jealousy about the egg. I spent the replacement jade slip on Wu Training Expert, which had been dead weight since the day I established my foundation, and stealing heavenly secrets fired anyway. 3 cards, on a rewrite, which it was under no obligation to do. Decoy mirror image. Spirit Horse, 30% faster than a flying sword. Shadow Dive. In Shadow, even a cultivator of a higher realm cannot detect you. I took Shadow Dive, and with it, the stack finally closed. Shadow Dive, so nobody can find me. 10-mile tracking, so nothing I throw can be dodged. Distant Echo, so the body doing the throwing is made of paper and 1,000 miles away. Double casting, so everything happens twice. The suspended heavenly eye, so I see the whole board, and the divine sense sword pellet, which ignores armor, shields, and flesh entirely. A golden core true person can sweep dozens of miles with his divine sense and still die without ever finding out where I was standing. The only obstacle left was that the soul refining and casting method required 3 7-orifices heart-melting pills, second tier superior. 6 or 7,000 spirit stones each on the open market, when they appear at all, which is rarely because the failure rate is high enough that no established alchemist will risk his reputation attempting them. My eldest senior sister is a second-tier high-grade alchemist with a third-tier Bifang Azure Flame Furnace. She spent 2 months at that furnace and made 6. The rumor came back to Fallen Moon Immortal City about 5 weeks after Green Pine Valley, and it arrived exactly the shape I'd built it. Elder Hu of the Moon Shadow Sect has been cuckolded. His mistress took 5 or 6 Thousand Illusion Sect cultivators into her bed, and somehow set off a war among them so vicious that the true disciple Qi Yuan died in it, and now both sects are holding Xiaming jointly responsible, and neither will accept the other's explanation. And there was a detail attached to it that I hadn't planted, and it did more work than anything I did. On the day it happened, Xiaming himself was away from Green Pine Valley. He was out competing for the Wind Spirit sect's abandoned shops. The Moon Shadow sect had pulled its agent out ahead of the massacre, sat on its hands while a brother sect was slaughtered, and then sent its Golden Core elders to go bid on the storefronts. Wen Jing heard that part in a tea house, and I watched something go out of her face and not come back. She never mentioned xianxia again. At the next table over, a woo-woo sect man named He Jian was loudly insisting that his sect had tried to organize a rescue, that they had gone to the other three and proposed it, and that the answer they got back was, and his junior sister put 2 fingers on his sleeve and he stopped talking. Now, Xiao Yu. She was alive. 3,000 feet underneath the ruins of the Wind Spirit sect, in a room 10 feet across, behind a 4th-order concealment array that Nascent Soul True Lords had been sweeping past for 2 years without ever noticing. 2 years earlier, on the night the sect fell, the Illusion Snowsword Immortal had killed 2 Nascent Soul True Lords and escaped with Chen Rumeng, who by then had reached Foundation establishment. And she paid for it. Her golden core was cracked. Her strength was under 1/10 of what it had been. The woman who had thrown 3,000 people off a mountaintop with a breath of wind would now have had trouble with a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. And the hiding place existed because of the one thing about her second disciple that she had always considered a waste of everyone's time. When manhwa was small, she hid under a water vat and watched bandits kill her mother and her sister. Her father and grandfather did not come back in one piece. Xiao Yu found her afterward, in the corpses, still under the vat. And years later, when manhwa formed her foundation and was told to name her reward, she asked for a chamber under Lingyuan Peak that a nascent soul could not find. Her master thought it was paranoia and gave it to her anyway, the way you humor a child. On the day the sect fell, Xiao Yu faked her own escape with illusions and went straight down into it. The room was 10 feet across and had been 2 people's entire world for 2 years. Chen Rumeng was not the girl I'd left. Foundation establishment, warm as spring sunlight, with something inside her that burns through anything it touches. She had spent 2 years blaming herself for her master's injuries in that 10-foot space, and Xiao Yu, who is spectacularly bad at comfort, kept trying and failing to fix it. And then Chen Rumeng said the thing she'd been holding. If Li died in the calamity, I don't want to live. And I said, from the doorway, well said. She hit my chest hard enough to hurt and then apologized, to me, for failing to protect me. I didn't say anything back. There wasn't anything. So I hummed. It's a farming song. It's what people in Spiritual Field District C sing on the walk out at dawn and on the walk back at dusk. And it is not a good song, and she had heard it 400 times through a wall. And a 10-foot cell 3,000 feet under a graveyard, ringed by demon cultivators, turned back into courtyard C357, sunrise over the fields, lunch on the ridge, 2 people carrying tools home, with the sun going down behind them and their shadows tangled up on the path. Xiao Yu turned around and faced the wall and pretended very hard that she couldn't hear anything, which she then had to keep doing because about 4 minutes later, her 16-year-old at-heart disciple proposed dual cultivation to me in front of her. Her reasoning was that only by getting stronger could she protect me. Her follow-up was to ask why I was so unusually familiar with the theory. Her follow-up to that was to remind me, out loud, that she was the one who'd given me the manual. Xiao Yu nearly dropped her natal flying sword. I watched a golden core cultivator consider murder in real time. And then Chen Rumeng mumbled, half to herself, that the manual also had a healing application, that dual cultivation could mend her master's injuries. Xiao Yu looked at me again. I would like the record to show that I said nothing whatsoever. Let me back up and explain how I got into that room, because it was half a month of the most enjoyable work I have ever done. A paper doll, shadow dive, 10-mile tracking, the suspended heavenly eye, and a divine sense sword pellet that recharges. And a target-rich environment, because the 3 demonic sects had left occupation forces all over those 7 ruined peaks. I killed them one at a time. Dozens of Foundation establishment cultivators, hundreds at Wu refining, and 2 true disciples belonging to Nascent Soul Masters, which is the part that made it a crisis instead of an inconvenience. A dozen Golden Core true persons came out and tore the mountains apart looking for the killer and found nothing at all, because I had discovered the loophole that made the whole campaign possible. An inactive paper doll, sitting still, reads to a nascent soul's divine sense as a rock, or a shrub. It is not alive, so there is nothing to sense. So they would sweep 100 miles of mountainside, find nothing, conclude the killer had fled, and leave. And 40 minutes later, another body would drop. By the end of it, 3 sects that had just annihilated one of the 5 great sects of Canglan were reduced to sending golden core true persons to carry messages. Nobody below that rank would step outside a ward. And their golden cores spent their evenings cursing the coward who wouldn't come out and fight like a man. Then, when the pressure was exactly right, I let them almost see one. A paper doll hitting a golden core team with 10 sword pellets at once, glimpsed for half a second, and then gone. 10 pellets, sword intent on them, cold as ice, and they came to the only conclusion available. It's Xiao Yu. She's wounded. She's still out there. She's still hunting us. Every resource 3 demonic sects had in that province went into hunting a woman who was lying 3,000 feet underneath their feet, not moving. And once the mountains had been emptied of everyone who might notice, I bribed a spirit rat with a beast pill and rode a paper doll down a rat hole to a door. I put a bottle of 3rd-tier healing pills in her hands, which the 3 of us had bought at a price I am not going to say out loud, and Xiao Yu, who has never in her life leaned on anyone, held them and did not have anything to say. I caught her looking at me twice that day. I think that was when she finally understood what her disciple had seen in a rice farmer, and I think it annoyed her. My life after that ran in 3 places at once. My real body sat in Fallen Moon Immortal City taking Wenjing's medicine. 1 paper doll lived in the cellar under a dead sect with my master and my wife-to-be, and a rotating cast of other dolls kept walking circles around 3 demonic sects, making sure that nobody ever stopped looking in the wrong direction. Manhua went into full production. Wenjing went back to the furnace. 1 breath transformed into 3 pure ones, as they say. Except the version of me that mattered was in a hole in the ground. Xiao Yu's injury was not a crack. That was the good news and the bad news in the same sentence. Inside her golden core, there were strands of a Nascent Soul True Lord's primordial demonic energy, embedded in it the way maggots embed in bone. They ate her spiritual power. They widened the fissures they lived in, and they fed her illusions and inner demons around the clock, so that she could never stop suppressing them for a single hour, awake or asleep, for 2 years. Any other golden core cultivator in Canglan would have died in the first month. I looked inside her dantian with a thread of divine sense the first time we tried, and what's in there is a sun, a dulled one, sitting in an ocean that has been mostly drained, spiderwebbed with cracks, and wrapped in layers of demonic energy from 3 different sects. And her own spiritual energy, which has nowhere to go and no chance of winning, was still turning itself into swords of ice and still attacking it, 2 years in, on its own, without her attention. Wenjing's method was not to fight it, because you cannot fight it. It was to move it. Demonic energy is territorial, and it bullies whatever is weakest, and that is not a metaphor, that is a documented property. So the instant my thread of divine sense entered her dantian, a strand of it turned into a serpent and came for the intruder, and I ran, out of her body, down the thread and into a paper doll, which has no dantian to conquer, no core to nest in, no consciousness to torment, just a hollow shape that looks like a person. The first time it worked, Xiao Yu stared at me for a good while and then said, "You have deceived the source of demonic energy itself. You are more demonic than the demon cultivators." Then she stepped into the doll after it and killed the strand with her own sword intent, while I watched from inside and took notes. 3 days for the first strand. We estimated half a year for all of it. Somewhere in the 3rd month, she noticed the thing I'd been hoping she wouldn't. Every time her consciousness passed through mine, she was measuring it. And what she was measuring was already stronger than a normal late-stage foundation establishment cultivators on a man in the 3rd layer. And I had taken the soul refining and casting method, a 1,000 illusion true disciple's secret that takes 3 years to reach the entry threshold, to the entry threshold in 1 month. She never said anything about it. But I could see her arriving at the conclusion, and I know what it was, because it changed how she spoke to me afterward. He doesn't need Chen Rumeng's protection. He doesn't need mine either. I hand-copied both soul methods with my own annotations, every mistake I'd made, every shortcut, every place the original text is wrong, and gave a set to Chen Rumeng and a set to Wenjing and a set to manhwa, and a set to my master. Chen Rumeng held hers against her chest and said she'd work hard so she could protect me. I asked Xiao Yu straight out one evening how far she was from deity transformation, which told her that I'd seen her sheet, that I knew about divine intervention, that I knew she can never form a nascent soul and doesn't need to. She stopped hiding it. Canglan Cultivation Country has not produced a deity transformation venerable in tens of thousands of years. The injury isn't what's stopping her. The bottleneck isn't power or cultivation or time. She is missing one opportunity. One specific, correct, once-in-an-era opportunity. And the Tiandao anomaly may be it. Back home, my body was going through a growth spurt that made me unpopular with the neighbors. Wen Jing's medicine had hardened my physique to the point where I could beat other early Foundation establishment cultivators into the ground with my hands, which is not something a talisman cultivator is supposed to be able to do. And when I broke through to the third layer, the surge pulled so hard on the ward's spirit vein that it dropped from mid-grade second tier to high-grade first tier and stayed there, and I had to listen to 4 separate old men complain about it in the street. Mei Hua, meanwhile, had learned about the dual cultivation arrangement and begun a campaign to be included in it, which I deflected with promises, gifts, and on one occasion, a physical wall. Third layer menu. The Brain Eater. Purple. Eat a corpse, take its memories and part of its cultivation. Many children bring many blessings. Yin Yang. Cultivation speed per child, personally born. 2 become 1. Blue. Shadow Dive extends to your Taoist partner, and the effect multiplies. I took the blue one over the purple one, and then, about 4 seconds later, I realized the actual question I'd just bought an answer to. How does the Heavenly Dao define Taoist partner? Because I have not married anybody. I'd also, by then, started stealing from my own master. Every time she killed a strand of demonic energy inside a paper doll, I was in there watching her do it, from about 2 feet away, from the inside, over and over, for months. Nobody in the history of the Wind Spirit sect has ever had that seat, so I seeded her sword intent into my own divine sense sword pellet, and it took. The pellet grew a soul. It went frost cold. It began contracting inward on itself, densifying, and it acquired the specific quality of her sword, which is that it does not cut bodies, it cuts the thing wearing the body. I wrote my next goal in a notebook that night, and it was an absurd thing for a third-layer Foundation establishment cultivator to write down. Threaten a golden core. And if the opening comes, kill one. Then Xiao Yu tried to send me away, and we had the argument that changed everything. Her order was simple. Take Chen Rumeng out through the siege. Leave her behind. Come back later if there is a later. And I said no. And then I said the sentence that nobody had said to that woman in about 150 years. Master, you are not alone. You do not have to carry all of it by yourself. She has been the illusion snow sword immortal since she was a girl who watched an entire world get erased around her, whose master walked into the snow and never came back, who held a ruined peak alone for 6 months watching names go dark one by one in a communication talisman. The last person who told her she didn't have to be strong was her mother. And then I went further, because I could see it working, and I told her the other thing. That her real problem was not the injury, it was arrogance. That a disciple is not required to be less than the master. That disciples have a duty to push the master forward, and not only to stand there gratefully receiving favors, and that she had spent a century refusing to let anyone do it. She sat very still for a long time, and her Tao heart cleared, and the golden core consummation bottleneck she had been stuck behind for decades moved for the first time. Li Jin, she said, you are the most important opportunity for me to break through to deity transformation. And then she made a vow, out loud, in a 10-foot room under a graveyard. My sword will also become your sword, at your command. This is the lifelong promise of Xiao Yu. I did not have a joke ready. I still don't. But I want to be clear about what happened in that room, because it is the moment the story turns. A rice farmer who kept 30 bushels out of 100 walked into a hole in the ground and walked out of it as the uncrowned master of Lingyun Peak. Her recovery accelerated to 3 or 4 months after that. Something about a Dao heart that has stopped fighting itself. And I tested to become one on Chen Rumeng. I took her hand, and we both vanished. Xiao Yu, at the peak of Golden Core, swept the room with her divine sense and found nothing. She had to walk forward with her hands out and grope for us like a woman in a dark bedroom. And when she found Chen Rumeng's sleeve, she made a noise I will remember on my deathbed. 2 conclusions came out of that. 1. The Heavenly Dao already counted Chen Rumeng as my Taoist partner. Not by ceremony, not by act, by intent. It had made that decision on its own some time ago and had simply never mentioned it. 2. If a peak golden core cultivator standing 8 feet away cannot detect us, then a nascent soul demon standing on a ruined mountain has, at a rough estimate, about a 2% chance, which meant I could walk her straight out through the siege. Chai Ning came to my door about a week later, and she came in without the tea set, which was how I knew. 2 people wanted to meet me. The Azure Mountain Lord, middle golden core, body cultivator, and Cloud Between Immortal, middle golden core, formation master, the man who personally built the defenses of Canglan residence. Those are the city lord's own trusted pair, not the family's, his, personally placed with his daughter. And behind them, 37 Foundation Establishment rogue cultivators under contract, mostly mid and late stage. A woman like Chai Ning does not volunteer her entire order of battle to an outsider unless 2 things are true. The storm has already arrived, and they have decided to ask me for Xiao Yu. The banquet was tense in an entertaining way. The Azure Mountain Lord looked at me the way a career soldier looks at a consultant. He got about 90 seconds into explaining, politely, that this was not really a matter for early Foundation Establishment rogue cultivators, and Tang Yun, without blinking, said that I was traveling on the orders of a Nascent Soul True Lord elder. She made it up on the spot. It was not even a good lie. It didn't survive contact with a single follow-up question, and nobody asked one, because the man's entire face changed inside one breath and stayed changed for the rest of the evening. He refilled my cup twice. Cloud Between Immortal spent his half of the dinner gently steering the conversation toward how much closer he and Tang Yun ought to become, given the times. And Tang Yun agreed, enthusiastically. She said that yes, absolutely, they should become much closer, and that she had always felt they could work together more directly. He looked delighted. She had understood not one word of what he was actually proposing. Chai Ning watched the 2 of them have entirely different conversations at each other for 20 minutes and said nothing at all, and I have rarely respected a person more. Then came the real offer, which was that the 3 Li siblings should move into Canglan residence, 4th Order Spirit Vein, 4th Order Arrays, and a public, unambiguous alliance. I said I'd think about it. And 2 middle golden core cultivators, the daughter of the city lord, and the sharpest woman in that city, all sat there holding their breath, waiting on an answer from an early Foundation Establishment nobody. Then Tang Yun took me behind a 4th-tier isolation array and told me why. Her father is not in seclusion. Shu Long left Fallen Moon Immortal City months ago. He left Canglan Cultivation Country entirely. He has gone to attempt Nascent Soul. His odds are under 30%. He went now, she explained, because the anomaly is coming and he wants the power to shelter his city through it, and because the 3 demonic sects are currently busy digesting the Wind Spirit sect and won't notice. I didn't say what I thought because there was no version of saying it that helped her. Here is what I thought. 4 sects and 3 gates share this country, and every one of them has spent 100 years counting exactly how many nascent souls each of the others has. A city lord going off alone to add 1 to a list that nobody controls is not a secret anyone keeps. The moment he stepped over the border, he was a dead man walking. The only open question was how long the news would take to get home. In the carriage back, Chai Ning laid out the board for me without being asked. Each brother can put roughly 3 golden cores on the street. Each brother has a nascent soul-level asset held in reserve that they will not name. Canglan residents, at full strength, can defend Canglan residents and nothing else. I promised her Xiao Yu in 2 or 3 months. She privately did not believe that woman was alive. She told me so later, and she chose to act as though she did on one piece of reasoning. A man who was lying about having a golden core in his pocket would have already left the city. She offered me a golden core escort home. I turned it down, and I told her why, and it embarrassed all 3 of them for a week. If you send both of your golden cores out to walk me across town, then for the duration of that walk, the general is sitting in a house with nobody in front of her. They had not thought of it. So I walked home alone, and about 4 blocks from the ward, a trapping array sealed both ends of an empty street. I had been expecting it for 11 days. 4 10,000 beasts sect body cultivators came over the walls: tiger, ox, wolf, dog, all of them half transformed and enormous, and behind them, hidden, a divine sense sword pellet at late Foundation establishment strength. And I did nothing correct at all. I didn't use shadow dive. I didn't use my own pellet. I put up shields and let them break, one at a time, in the right order, taking exactly as long as a competent early-stage cultivator would take. And then I let them kill me. They stood over the wreckage of a paper doll worth 1,000 spirit stones and picked through the artifacts it had dropped. The wolf demon complained out loud about the effort they'd wasted on such trash, and the tiger demon slapped him into a wall for suggesting they detour on the way home and collect the 2 Li women as well. I want to note that I got all of that on the jade plate, in full, from a rooftop 900 meters away, while eating. At home, alive, I put my feet up and said the only line I'd prepared. As expected. This trip caught some fish, because Li Guang was now publicly dead, which made Li Rong and Li Yun the obvious next targets, which meant that for the first time since the sect fell, I knew where my enemies were going to be, and roughly when, and I hadn't had to ask anyone. The double feint went out 4 days later. 2 disguised figures left Fallen Moon Immortal City by the East Road and were ambushed 60 miles out by 6 rogue cultivators, hired quietly through 3 intermediaries by the 4th young master. Those 6 were then slaughtered on the road back by a golden core belonging to the eldest young master. He brought their heads to the city gate and hung them up as a public service, and announced that he had avenged the Li siblings, who had been valued friends of the Shu family. Both brothers spent that evening gloating over corpses made of paper, and while the entire city was watching the east gate, I walked my 2 senior sisters into Canglan residence through the front door, invisible, under shadow dive and 2 become 1, holding both their hands, past 40 of their own guards. I got a good look at both brothers over the following month, and I want to give you the portraits because it matters for what happens to them. Xu Sheng, the eldest, crushed a wine cup in his fist when his sister's name came up, and called her a word I'm not going to repeat. And he was negotiating with an envoy, not from any of the 4 sects, not from any of the 3 gates, from outside Canglan Cultivation Country entirely. That envoy was the person who told him where his father had gone, and the envoy was promising him something considerably larger than a city. Xu Hao, the 4th, broke 2 maids' necks in 1 week for spoiling his mood, and he was working directly with the demonic sects, and when he was informed that a demon golden core had toyed his own childhood sweetheart to death and driven his wife to suicide, he thought about it for a moment and said, "A great man need not worry about finding a wife. Her sacrifice for my ascension was not in vain." And then, "Tell her family she died of qi deviation." Both of them, meanwhile, were publicly blaming each other for the murder of the Li siblings, whom I had murdered. For a month, they strangled Xianglan residents. Every external asset was picked off. Shops closed, caravans stopped, retainers quietly took other offers. Tang Yun ended up sealed inside her own house like a turtle in a jar, and the 2 golden cores could do nothing, because everything they might do required stepping outside. In practice, by the end of that month, the person making the decisions inside Xianglan residence was me. 2 middle golden core cultivators, the city lord's daughter and her right hand, had all quietly started waiting to hear what I thought. And what I did for that entire month was cultivate, nothing else. Not one move. I sat in a room and got stronger while a siege tightened around a house full of people who were looking at me, and that shamed them more than any speech would have. Then, at the end of it, I asked Tang Yun for one thing: the daily movements of every important man under her eldest brother, where they drink, where they sleep, who they see. I handed Cai Ning a slip of paper with rumors on it and told her where to start them. And I told Tang Yun the only strategy I have ever actually believed in. The tsunami is coming either way, but when it comes, and how big it is when it arrives, that part we decide. Wen Jing delivered a case of knockout poisons. Mei Hua delivered a set of paper dolls, and she'd made them deliberately, spectacularly ugly. Leopard-headed, eagle-headed, half beast, half man. Exactly the way a frightened drunk in an alley at 2 in the morning would remember a demon cultivator looking. I rode one out of that house under shadow dive, and the bloody night that determined the fate of Fallen Moon Immortal City started at about the 3rd watch. 12 of the eldest young master's Foundation establishment retainers died that night, plus 1 at the late stage, which is the one that actually hurt him. dead in a brothel, dead over a table in a tavern with the cup still upright, dead in an alley behind a noodle shop. And every surviving witness in the city swore the same thing because it was true. They saw demon cultivators, leopard heads, eagle heads, 1,000 Illusion sect and 10,000 Beasts sect working the streets openly, which everyone in that city knew for a fact were in the pocket of exactly one man. Xu Sheng put his fist through a stone table at dawn. "Fourth brother, you killed 12 of my people in one night. They went to war on a lie neither one of them could disprove." Feng Jin got about 4 words into "what if it's your sister" before Xu Sheng lifted him off the ground by his collar and held him there. 2 streets burned. The 2 brothers' golden cores wounded each other badly enough that both sides had to stop. Rogue cultivators, who had nothing to do with any of it, died in the crossfire, in their own doorways, in a city that had been safe for 200 years. And out of all that grief, the city produced exactly the sentence I had paid Cai Ning to plant, and it came back to us from people who thought they'd invented it. Only the 6th miss is the future of Fallen Moon Immortal City. Chen Lan residents went from 30-odd Foundation establishment retainers down to 15 during the siege. By the end of that month, it had over 50, which made it stronger than either brother. And then the Shu family elders, who had been sitting on the fence with the patience of men who have sat on many fences, climbed down on our side. 12 storage bags came off that night, and they paid for the whole operation more than 10 times over. One of them had a 3rd-tier low-grade talisman treasure in it, a single-use item that delivers a full golden core strike, 2 charges left. A golden core killer, in my pocket, that I did not have to be strong enough to use. I gave almost everything else to my senior sisters, which Wen Jing objected to on principle, and I gave her the one line I actually believe about money. Spirit stones only mean anything when they're being spent. Then I punctured the celebration, because somebody had to. 2 brothers were tearing each other apart in the streets. Everybody in that house was delighted, and the moment they stopped, the moment either one of them sat down for an hour and did the arithmetic on who had gained from all of it, they were going to look at exactly one house, and they were going to look at it together. Tang Yun went quiet, and then she went upstairs, and then she came back down and handed me her trump card. It was a crystal ball about the size of a palm, with something like a small sun turning over inside it. The Earth Vein Core, keyed to the ley line under Xianglan residence. Break it, and the residence and everything inside it becomes powder, not damaged, not destroyed. Powder. Enough, she said, to cripple a Nascent Soul True Lord standing in the blast. Then she put it in my hand and closed my fingers on it. Now it's yours. 2 quiet months followed, and I used them. 4th layer of Foundation establishment. 9 oxen, 2 tigers. Yin, yang. Scatter into 11 beasts and survive as long as any one of them does. Lose the rest, and you remain permanently an ox, or a tiger. Duke Lei helps me. Yin yang. Command lightning. Be struck by lightning daily, forever. Heart sword, tilting the sky. Yin yang. The heart sword gains 1 minor realm of power for every acquired blessing you have ever taken, stored up, released on use. Downside, it can only ever be used inside your own mind. I had 12 acquired blessings, which meant that card, on the day it was offered, already carried the power of a late-stage golden core, and the downside cost me nothing. I fight inside people's minds. That's the entire discipline. The Heavenly Dao had attached a restriction to that blessing that was, for me specifically, a description of my job. I took it and did not spend a single charge of the heavenly scripture fixing it. 2 months earlier, Tang Yun had handed me a nuclear weapon. Now I had a small one of my own. My divine sense reached 10 miles that season. 10-mile tracking quietly became 20. Wen Jing broke into the 7th layer after 5 years stuck on the 6th and credited the dual cultivation in front of manhwa, who then had to be physically restrained. More importantly, her medicine and poison could now shave a 10th or 2 off a golden core cultivator's strength, and because it arrives inside them as healing, there is nothing to block, nothing to detect, and nothing to resist. Xiao Yu reached 80%, which at her level means she could kill an early-stage Nascent Soul True Lord while still being a golden core. Half a month more to peak. Half a month after that to cross several 100,000 miles. And I finally told her the thing I'd been sitting on for a week. The City Lord's corpse had come back. shipped home from a neighboring country by people who were being very polite about it. Xu Long failed his nascent soul, or was helped to fail it, and either way, Canglan Residence's entire strategic position had been a dead man for a month, and nobody had known. I told her we had 1 month. I did not tell her how bad it actually was. The siege came 11 days later. 100 Foundation establishment cultivators in the air over that house. 1,000 at Wu Refining on the ground. 6 golden cores, both brothers, and a delegation of Shu family uncles who came forward to explain gently to Tang Yun that the sensible thing now was to accept a marriage, and be a wife, and be a mother, and let the men settle it. Then the brothers played their trumps. Xu Sheng turned and bowed to his own mansion, and something answered. A nascent soul phantom unfolded across the whole sky over Fallen Moon Immortal City. 10,000 manifestations, True Lord. Every golden core cultivator on that field, all 6 on both sides, bowed on reflex before they could decide not to. And Xu Hao answered it. His was called Joyful Venerable of the Vajra sect, and he arrived chanting. That chant turned into petals in the air, and the petals turned into things that were not petals, and within about 40 seconds, the entire city was drowning in something that got into people's heads and turned them stupid and eager. Foundation establishment cultivators went to their knees. Golden cores started breathing wrong. It reached inside 100,000 people at once and started pulling. Su Wen, the second uncle, had to beg him out loud to stop. The Azure Mountain Lord and Cloud Between Immortal both, at that point, began quietly working out where the exits were. I don't blame them. I want to say that clearly. Canglan Residence came apart from the inside over the next 2 days without anyone doing anything treacherous at all. The retainers wanted to run. The 2 golden cores went into their own caves and sent word out that the miss should make other arrangements. Given another week, they would have handed her over to save themselves, and they would have hated themselves, and they would have done it. Tang Yun offered to stay behind and break the ley line herself. Cai Ning refused to leave, and when Tang Yun ordered her, she said the only thing she has ever said to me that I would call a confession. This is what I owe you. Now, it's just being returned. I sat in a room by myself through all of it, and I was not worried, and I want to be honest about why, because it isn't courage. The groundwork was already laid. And a man who has decided to decapitate someone always has to come inside to do it. They bought the way in. 10,000 manifestations gave Xu Sheng a jade talisman that opens a 4th-tier array in one direction. In, not out. And Joyful Venerable, sitting on a lotus throne in a hall where every woman had been drained down to a withered husk and left where she fell, handed Xu Hao something called the Joyful Relic, a blood-colored bead holding the essence of 1,000 female cultivators, which corrodes formations the way acid corrodes cloth. And then he named his price. Tang Yun, Cai Ning, Cloud Between Immortal, and every other woman in the residence. Xu Hao kowtowed 3 times and thanked him for his generosity. They came in through opposite walls of Tang Yun's study at the same moment, which was well coordinated, and which is exactly what I would have done. Fang Xuan through 1. And out of the dark on the other side, third uncle Xu Guang, who froze Tang Yun's arm before she could get her hand around the earth vein core. He had about 1.5 seconds to enjoy that. Then Tang Yun smiled at him, and sword light flooded half of Canglan Residence. Both golden cores survived it, at the cost of most of their bodies, which is a genuine testament to the toughness of a middle golden core cultivator. Both of them dragged themselves to the array wall and reached into their robes for their healing pills. They'd both been treated by Wen Jing's people during the siege. Everybody in that house had. It was a courtesy she extended to the whole residence, personally, over 2 months, free of charge, and nobody had thought twice about it, because who thinks twice about a healer? Their own pills went down, and medicine and poison share the same origin turned over inside them. And Xu Guang, cornered and dying, with his own bloodline nephew bleeding out 3 meters away, made his decision fast. He ate Fang Xuan's golden core, out of his chest, in front of him. And he explained himself while he was doing it, which is the part I actually admire, in a horrible way. Rather than both of us dying, it's better that only you die. I'll avenge you. Then, 2 seals came down out of the ceiling and flattened him. I stepped out of the shadow beside the door, holding Wen Jing's hand, and gave him the line I'd been saving for about 6 weeks. You've brought a beheading operation, and I've sent you an invitation into the urn. 2 golden core soul lanterns went out that night in 2 different mansions. Xu Sheng lost his maternal clan's ancestor. Xu Hao lost the joyful relic, and was personally flayed by his own patron for losing it, and I would give a great deal to have seen that. And both of them arrived at the same wrong conclusion, which was the correct wrong conclusion. Canglan residence is hiding something that kills middle golden core cultivators in seconds. Neither nascent soul would go in after that, not with a ley line bomb under the floor and an unknown killer standing on it. Stalemate, which is all I had ever wanted, because a stalemate is a word that means time, and time was the only thing I was short of. 2 weeks later, a message came in from 3,000 feet under a dead sect. Li Jin, I am ready. Xiao Yu took Chen Rumeng's hand and reversed her grip on her sword. And on the far side of those ruins, out of a cave nobody had opened in 2 years, a masked sword cultivator in white walked into the open under Shadow Dive and started moving toward the demonic sect's barracks. She looked a little like Xiao Yu. Only a little, just enough. She was made of paper. I want to tell you about that night properly, because it is the best night's work of my life, and I have never been able to tell anyone. The first stop was the square in front of the Wind Spirit sect's main gate, the one where 600 children sat on stone benches and had their whole lives decided in 8 seconds. The 10,000 Beasts sect had made it a barracks, tents on the flagstones, and inside some of those tents, women were crying, and they had been crying there for a while. I opened with talismans. Frost Star froze 1,000 feet of that square solid, tents, sentries, and all. Surge went through the survivors while they were still stuck in it, and Fire Rain turned what was left into a sea of flame that lit up the whole mountainside. Everyone who came up into the air after me died to double-cast sword pellets before they closed to within 10 miles, including 1,000 Illusion Sect true disciple at Late Foundation establishment who got about 400 meters and then simply stopped flying. Then a golden core answered the alarm, and I buried the doll in a crack in the rock and let it go still, and it became a piece of stone. He swept that mountain for an hour, and while he was doing that, I surfaced out of an underground river on the far side of the sect, in a second paper doll, this one wearing Xiao Yu's face, and did the entire thing again to the Vajra sect's camp. That one brought out something with an actual name. Great Yang Venerable came down out of the sky and vaporized 30 miles of mountains and rivers into a basin of glowing lava. All at once, in about 4 seconds. I have seen a lot of power by this point in my life. That was the first time I understood the word nascent soul in my body instead of my head. He killed a paper doll. Third strike, and for the third one I went hunting deliberately, because 2 demonstrations is a pattern and 3 is a war. I went for a golden core, a 6-armed spider demon who was herding his own sect's disciples into position with silk, which told me everything about how that camp was being run. I put 2 wisps of borrowed sword intent, Xiao Yu's sword intent, learned from the inside of a paper doll over 4 months, into his golden core, and left a scar on it that he will carry for the rest of his life. By dawn, 6 Nascent Soul True Lords had chased the Illusion Snow Sword Immortal 10,000 miles in 3 directions across one night, and found ash, craters, and no bodies. And at some point in the middle of all that, on the peak they had all left behind, Lingyun Peak split open from underneath. Xiao Yu came up out of the ground, killed the early-stage nascent soul they'd left on guard duty, and walked out into an empty sky holding Chen Rumeng's hand. We regrouped in the mortal world, in the Great Sha capital, at a place called the Hao Lai Inn. I booked 3 rooms. Then Xiao Yu rearranged it to 2. Then Xiao Yu rearranged it to 1, at the counter, in front of the innkeeper, without any change of expression whatsoever, and the entire common room turned around to look at the middle-aged scholar with 4 women. We lay low there for a while, in a country with no spiritual energy, specifically because it's the one place a cultivator can't be tracked without walking in on foot, and not because of the demonic sects. Because a golden core cultivator who can kill nascent souls, walking around alive and unaffiliated, is a problem for the 4 orthodox sects too. The Moon Shadow sect had already proved what they were willing to do to a brother sect. I was not going to hand them a second chance at her. We left Chen Rumeng behind in that inn with a paper doll for company. She hated it, and she understood it. If everything went wrong in Fallen Moon Immortal City, she was the kindling we'd kept outside the house. Fallen Moon Immortal City had gotten worse while we were away. Tang Yun's report was short. The two brothers had stopped fighting each other, exactly as predicted, and were now spending a third of the city's accumulated wealth on a single project, the Universe Cavern Heaven Grand Array, a formation built specifically to break a fourth-tier ward from the outside, 20 days to completion. They had demolished an entire street block to lay it out, and they were fueling it with people. 1,000 of them chained in rows inside the array's boundary. A significant number of them were Tang clansmen, and the reason they were in there was that they had objected. I looked at that for a while. "We have been suppressed long enough," I said. "The counterattack starts now." The Azure Mountain Lord and Cloud Between Immortal came out of their caves that afternoon and picked a side, and I'd like to say it was shame, and I think it was mostly the fact that we had come back at all. The two brothers came to the gates with everything they had left and demanded justice for their uncles, which was, to be fair, a legitimate grievance. I did kill them. Tang Yun stepped aside, Cai Ning stepped aside, both Golden Cores stepped aside, and I flew out to the front of Xianglan residence by myself. You could watch the conclusion move across that entire field. 100 cultivators in the air, all arriving at the same thought at the same moment, and the thought was, there he is. That's the mysterious late-stage Golden Core true person who's been killing our people. And then, and this is my favorite detail of the whole war, several of them began complaining, out loud, about the bad manners of a Golden Core cultivator going around disguised as a mid-stage Foundation establishment nobody. Both brothers immediately began bidding for me, in public, over each other. Then they gave up and summoned their patrons instead. 10,000 manifestations True Lord came in his true body this time, and Joyful Venerable descended on a lotus throne, and the throne floated over a hall he'd brought with him, and the hall was full of what he'd made of the women who had been in it. I looked up at two Nascent Soul True Lords over a city of 100,000 people, and I said the only line I had prepared for the occasion. "Master, I'll leave them to you." Xiao Yu rose into the sky. Joyful Venerable recognized her about half a second later, and I want to describe what he did precisely because it deserves to be preserved. He announced, in a warm and generous voice, that he had just remembered urgent business at home, and he was 100 miles away before he finished the sentence. He was gone before the sentence was gone. Shu Hao was still screaming after him about the wives and the children he had paid with, and the man was already a dot. She caught him anyway. Her illusionary sword split into 10,000 shadows. Human killing intent let her trade places between the true body and the illusions at will, so that every blow he blocked was the wrong one. And profound Yin Ice Soul ignores artifacts entirely and freezes the consciousness of the thing holding them. She took his body apart in the air over a mortal province. His nascent soul came out of the wreckage and ran for the Wind Spirit sect at 1,000 miles a breath, because that's where his sect's forces were, and because a nascent soul that reaches shelter can be reborn. And I was standing on that road, invisible. 14 sword pellets, 4 wisps of his own enemy's sword intent riding on them, and a double handful of second-tier talismans thrown out ahead like confetti at a wedding. He never saw the man who did it. What he said, right at the end, was the sentence that made the whole war worth it. I, a dignified nascent soul true lord, to die at the hands of a Golden Core. And I told him the truth, because he'd earned it. You're wrong. You died at the hands of a middle Foundation establishment cultivator. Su Hao's army broke while I was still on that road. It didn't rout so much as evaporate. His own Golden Core ancestor, the one who had been holding the family's western branch together for 80 years, took one look at the sky, loaded every relative he could reach onto a flying boat, and left without landing again. Above the city, meanwhile, Xiao Yu was fighting 10,000 manifestations True Lord. He had a technique called the 10,000 Phenomena Heavenly Evolution Art, which is exactly as impressive as it sounds. Every attack he made turned into 3 others on the way in. He filled a mile of sky with versions of himself, and what he was fighting was one woman, one sword, and falling snow. It ended in a single exchange, and the way the city found out it was over was that an arm came down out of the clouds and landed in the street. Every drop of blood that came off it turned into a small, crawling thing and ran away in a different direction. His voice came down after it, from somewhere a long way up and moving away fast. Good. Good. Good, Illusion Snow Sword Immortal. This time, you've won. Fallen Moon, Immortal City, is yours. And then he was gone, and there was 100,000 people standing in the streets, looking up. And there was nobody left in the sky over that city except my master. I handed the mopping up to Tong Yun. I want to be precise about that moment because it's the whole point of everything I did in that city. There was an army on the ground with its command structure gone. There were 2 brothers with no patrons. There was a seat. There was a seal. And there was a woman standing behind me who had spent 3 months being told by her uncles to marry someone and be a mother. I said, "The overall situation is settled. How you handle it is yours to decide." And I went and stood at the back. Cai Ning understood it about 4 seconds before anybody else did, and she looked at me with an expression I have not been able to describe since. He could have taken the city. He is deliberately not taking the city. Tong Yun walked up the white jade steps of the city lord's mansion with blood dripping off the head of a silver spear, 1 step at a time, and there was a line of it behind her all the way to the door. Xu Sheng was sitting on the seat at the top. He had lost the war 3 hours earlier, and he had gone and sat down on it anyway, and he was screaming about legitimacy before she was halfway up. Eldest son, trueborn, the clan's law. Her mother had been a serving girl. He said that last part 4 times. And then, second uncle Xu Wen walked out of the shadow at the side of the hall and stood between the seat and his nephew. He hadn't spoken during the whole war, not once. Both brothers had counted him as neutral, which meant both brothers had counted him. What he said was 1 sentence. I have always stood on the side of the city lord of Fallen Moon Immortal City. Xu Sheng looked at him for a moment. Then he raised his own palm and shattered his own skull with it rather than kneel, and the last thing he got out was a promise to watch her from up there and drag the city down to damnation with him. Xu Wen picked the city lord's seal up off the floor and put it in her hands. And then he did the other thing, the one nobody had asked him for. He announced, publicly, in front of the assembled clan, that the killing of the 4th young master was on him. His decision, his order, his hand. It wasn't true. It meant the new city lord did not have to begin her reign wearing the death of her own brother. The banquet was on Lingyun Peak's new terrace under flowers and a moon, and there were 5 of us, and I had not sat at a table with 5 bowls, all of them full, since I was 21 years old in a farmhouse. Zhao Yu raised her cup to me first, before her own disciples, in front of them. Wen Jing did the arithmetic out loud because somebody had to, and she did it gently. Junior brother, you don't need the protection of Lingyun Peak. Lingyun Peak was preserved because of you. Nobody argued with her. We all got drunk. Genuinely, properly drunk. In a way that 4 cultivators and 1 sword immortal absolutely should not get in a city they have owned for 11 days. We ended up on the roof under the whole galaxy. Zhao Yu sat cross-legged on the tiles with her sword across her knees, rubbing the flat of the blade with her thumb. She kept opening her mouth and then not saying it. She got it out about an hour before dawn. From today, she said, you are the first senior brother of Lingyun Peak, over Wen Jing's head, who had been first for several decades. It took Wen Jing about 3 full seconds to work out that she had just been demoted, and then she laughed so hard she had to lie down on the roof. And then Xiao Yu gave me the actual gift, the Lantian sword cannon, the secret transmission of every master of Lingyun Peak going back to the founding, the root of everything she is. I stayed up all night with it, and I got absolutely nowhere. Here is a thing I had never had to face before. My talisman talent is monstrous. It is not normal, it is not explicable, and it has carried me from a rice field to a city. My sword talent is completely average. Xiao Yu condensed the seed of a sword heart in 1 hour when she was a girl. Average talent takes 3 to 5 days. I sat with it for 2 days and produced nothing, and I worked out why, which was worse than not knowing. The sword intent inside my divine scent sword pellet is not mine. All of it, every wisp, is hers. I stole it by watching her kill demonic energy from inside a paper body 400 times. It is a castle built in the air. It has done extraordinary things for me, and there is no foundation underneath it anywhere. I decided to keep working at it anyway, for a reason I still stand by. If divine sense attacks were truly unbeatable, the Thousand Delusions sect would already rule Canglan by themselves, and they don't. The homage happened 4 days after that. 20-odd people knelt in the reception hall of a house I did not own. City Lord's mansion, the great clans, the merchant houses, both surviving golden cores. And I set the terms, and I want to read them out, because I had been composing them since I was holding a hoe. 1. Xianglan residence and the 4th-tier spirit vein under it are ceded outright to Lingyun Peak and renamed Lingyun Residence. 2. 2/10 of the city's annual profits, forever, not a payment, not a gift, not a stipend, a share. At the city's current ruined state that came to about 50,000 spirit stones a year, and the city was not going to stay ruined. 3. Every Tang trading channel prioritizes our materials. And then they offered me their loyalty, all of them, at once, and I turned it down. The one you should be loyal to, I said, is the city lord, Tang Yun. Anyone who defies her answers to Lingyun Peak, which did 2 things. It killed the whisper that had been going around for a week, which was that the 6th Miss had sold the city to a stranger to win her war. And it got me exactly what I actually wanted out of the whole arrangement, which was 50,000 spirit stones a year and no work. A rice farmer who once kept 30 bushels out of 100 now had a permanent claim on 20% of a city and had acquired it by being the only person in the room who didn't want the chair. 2 days later, my master and both of my senior sisters announced that they were entering seclusion. All 3. On the same morning, at the same hour. Citing, respectively, a bottleneck, an alchemical process, and, in Meihua's case, a sudden, urgent need to work on paper. They then walked out of the courtyard in a line, without looking back, and Manhua got about 4 steps before she turned around and gave me a thumbs up with both hands. Chenru Meng and I became Taoist partners that night, and that is all I am going to say about it, except that at some point she stopped being the girl who ate a letter in my doorway. In the morning, I sat behind her and combed her hair. I'd done it 100 times when she was small, badly, with a wooden comb, in a house with a dirt floor. I started putting it up the way she'd worn it since she was 12. She caught my wrist. "I'm not a maiden anymore," she said, to the mirror. "I'm Lee's wife." So I tied a married woman's bun instead, and I got it wrong twice, and she didn't say anything either time. Then we carried tea into the side room. 3 memorial tablets, Li Wei, Mei Fen, Li Tie-hu. I'd carried them out of 2 burning homes now, and set them up in 3 different houses, and they had been sitting in the dark in every one of them. She knelt down in front of them and told her parents and her grandfather that Xiaohua was married. And then she said, "It's just a pity that you couldn't see it with your own eyes," and that was the only part of it she couldn't get through. I started to make a vow. It came out of me the way those things do, out loud, the full formal thing, before the Heavenly Dao, that I would never wrong her. And she reached up and kissed me quiet in the middle of it. Then she explained why, and she was completely calm about it, and it took the top of my head off. Don't finish that. It's listening. If you swear it and something happens and you can't keep it, it will take it out of you. I'd rather have you than the promise. 16 years old when she awakened, 20-odd now, and she had understood the Heavenly Dao better in 1 sentence than most elders manage in a century. So I promised her a wedding instead, because that was a thing I could actually hand over. She said the wedding didn't matter. She said it twice. Then we walked out of that side room into the main hall, and the main hall was hung with red. All of it. Lanterns, silk, the character for double happiness on every pillar, a table laid for a wedding feast, and 3 women standing in the middle of it who were supposed to be in seclusion. Xiao Yu was out of her white robes. I had never once seen her in anything else. She was in brocade, with hairpins in, and she looked around the hall with a critical expression and said, to nobody, that it still wasn't festive enough. I want to remind you of something that woman said to me in a dirt courtyard years earlier, with her hand on her sword. I object to your marriage, and here is how she paid it. She hung a hall in red, put on colors for the first time in 100 years, and stood at the head of it while her disciple got married, and did not say 1 word about Dao hearts. Then the truth came out, because Manhua cannot hold anything for longer than an hour. There had been a betting pool, on how long the 2 of us would take. Wen Jing had said half a month. Manhua had said considerably less than that, and defended her position at length in front of the bride. Xiao Yu had said 1 month. She'd been holding the seclusion in reserve for a month. She had scheduled her own disappearance, her senior disciples' disappearances, and a wedding hall, and then sat there waiting for us with a wager on the table. Manhua lost. Her forfeit was 1 month as Wen Jing's test subject, and Xiao Yu's stake in the pool, which she announced with a completely straight face, was a personal guarantee that Manhua would not be poisoned to death during it. Fallen Moon Immortal City spent the next season rebuilding, and Tang Yun did it in a way that told me she'd been paying attention. Every asset in that city belonging to the 3 demonic sects was confiscated. All of it. Shops, warehouses, veins, the Fang clan's holdings, everything Xu Hao had signed over in the dark. And then she gave most of it away. To the Wu Wu sect, to the Moon Shadow sect, to the Danyang sect, to the Sword Ripples sect. In one move, she publicly divorced Fallen Moon Immortal City from the demonic path, and gave 4 orthodox sects a financial stake in her survival, and did not have to fight any of them for it. The Fang clan was exterminated to the last of 10,000. That was not gentle, and I'm not going to pretend it was. They had been the eldest young master's sword hand for 30 years, and there was no version of that city where they stayed in it. The Li clan, who had been on the wrong side and knew it, married a daughter into the Tang second branch and lived. And the goal was stated out loud at the first council, by Xiao Yu, in front of everyone, and it was not a small one. Restore the Wind Spirit sect, make it the first sect of Canglan. Fallen Moon Immortal City is the starting point, not the destination. The survivors started coming in about a month after that. Xiao Yu went to the city lord's mansion personally and negotiated it. Every scattered remnant of the Wind Spirit sect, every disciple who had gotten off that mountain and been living in a cave or a mortal town or a hole in the ground for 2 years gathered into Fallen Moon Immortal City under the city's protection. The city got the prestige and the manpower of an entire sect's survivors. The sect got somewhere to stand. I watched the first group come through the eastern gate, 40-something people in bad robes with everything they owned on their backs. 2 of them were outer disciples who had been 16 the year I collected the rent. The Wind Spirit sect had been the 5th of 5 and was now a line of refugees walking through somebody else's gate, and it was, that afternoon, more of a sect than it had been in 2 years, because it had an address. I flew across the city most mornings after that, mostly because I could. There's a rule in Fallen Moon Immortal City that nobody flies inside the walls, enforcement team accepted, golden cores accepted, and Ling Yun residence, which goes where it likes. One morning, a very young enforcer put his hand up and started reaching for his book to write me a citation, and his captain got to him at a speed I would describe as career-preserving and hit him across the back of the head. I heard the whole thing from about 40 meters up, because my divine sense reaches 10 miles and I am not above eavesdropping. That, the captain said, is a late-stage golden core true person with a bad habit of dressing as a Foundation establishment cultivator. Do not get crushed. There isn't even severance pay. I broke through to the 5th layer of Foundation establishment that autumn, in a house on a 4th-tier vein, with my wife asleep in the next room and 50,000 spirit stones a year coming in whether I got out of bed or not. 3 options. 2 become 1, upgraded, randomly seal one of your blessings and one of theirs. Self-destruct blessing. Burn one of your own blessings for a burst of power scaled to its rank. 1 glance determines truth. Look at anyone and read their entire blessing sheet. The second one is out on principle. I have 14 blessings, and each one of them is load-bearing. There is no card in that deck I would burn for a bigger explosion. The first one is out on arithmetic. A random seal on a man carrying time reversal is a coin flip on whether I still have a second life. So I took the eye, and the first thing I did with it, the very first thing, the same afternoon, sitting in my own courtyard, was read my own family. Wen Jing. Benevolence of a healer, blue. Medicine and poison share the same origin, blue. Xuan Yin, female body, purple, from death choice. And 1 slot empty. She has never filled it. 16 years of being the eldest, and there was a card she never got to draw. Mei Hua, nimble fingers, blue. Perfect imprint, green. And both of her extra slots empty. Not because she never had the chance, because nothing on the market fits a paper doll cultivator, and nobody has ever bothered writing a blessing for what she does, and she has spent her entire life building an underground kingdom out of an art the Heavenly Dao doesn't have a word for. And then I looked at Chen Rumeng, Nanming Leaf Fire, gold. I knew that one. The whole country would know it eventually. And underneath it, a purple foundation establishment blessing. Yin-yang intermingling. Dual cultivation effect increased 100% for her, 50% for her partner, and 50% better comprehension afterward. She chose that. Out of 3 cards, at the most important selection of her life, at the age of 19, in a 10-foot cell 3,000 feet under a dead sect, with her master's cracked golden core 2 feet away and demon cultivators walking around overhead. She looked at a menu written by the thing that runs the universe, and she picked the one whose entire function was me. And Zhao Yu, who spent years lecturing that girl about how a cultivator's heart must have no man in it, was sitting right there when it happened. She would have seen the card. She sees everything. She never said a word. And then, a year later, she scheduled a month-long seclusion for herself and both senior sisters, laid a bed on it, and hung a hall in red. Han Yang walked back into my life about a week later, on his own feet, at the 4th layer of foundation establishment, carrying 2 blessings he had not had the last time I saw him. Stepping Fire, which throws a fire spell every 100 meters he moves, and Nimble Fingers, which is silent theft, and which he showed me by handing back my own storage bag, on top of Make a Hasty Retreat and Alarm Bell in the Heart. The runaway Celestial Venerable had spent 2 years upgrading his kit, and every single item in it was about not being where the problem is. He got off the mountain the night it fell. And then a 1,000 illusion sect golden core named Ma Hong chased him for 3 days and 3 nights without stopping, which is not a chase, that is a personal matter, and it was. Ma Hong was one of the men who helped take his wife. Han Yang had killed the man's son. 72 hours, no sleep, a golden core 4 realms above him, closing. So he ran into the den of a 3rd-tier golden-winged leopard, and then walked out the other side while it ate the golden core instead of him. He also cleared a Heavenly Dao secret realm during those 2 years. A survival type, poison mist that closes in and shrinks the map until there's nowhere left to stand. There was no fighting in it and no puzzle in it. You simply run until everyone else stops. He finished top 3. I gave him a position at the City Lord's mansion and reminded him that he still had an outstanding medical bill with my eldest senior sister and watched his whole face do something complicated. But he brought a warning with him, and it was the one that mattered. Be careful of the Moon Shadow sect, he said. I've watched them take in Wind Spirit disciples, publicly, warmly, feasts, robes, the whole thing. And then I watched them cut them down in private a few days later, once nobody was counting. He left through the front gate that evening, and on his way out, he made a hand sign at me, small, fast, at waist height. The sort of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking. Be careful. His alarm bell in the heart had gone off. In my house, somewhere in the middle of a perfectly pleasant dinner with the City Lord of Fallen Moon Immortal City, her second uncle, and her right hand. So after he was gone, I sat down in the courtyard and used my new eye on the 3 people I trusted most in that city. Xu Wen, Tang Yun, Cai Ning, and all 3 of them had the same extra line on their sheet. Soul-seizing demon, rank gray, and then a number, and the numbers were not the same. Parasitic, 53 out of 100. 42 out of 100, 41 out of 100. What it does is not possession. It's slower and much better than that. It steers the host, a preference here, a suspicion there, a decision that feels entirely like their own, and it moves the counter up. And when the counter reaches 100, somebody else is wearing them. And the reason nobody ever catches it is the elegant part. As a side effect, it genuinely does make the host resistant to other mental attacks. It really works. It protects its own investment. I asked all 3 of them, casually, over the next 2 days, to show me their blessings. Old habit, I said. Han Yang's rule. You don't ask people questions, you ask to see their cards. They all agreed instantly, because they had nothing to hide. Xu Wen displayed mental barrier. Tang Yun displayed clear mind and spirit. Cai Ning displayed mental countermeasure. 3 completely different blessings, all of them genuine anti-mind control effects. All of them real, in the sense that all 3 of them could see them and describe them and had used them. None of them exist. And that is the part that put a cold hand on the back of my neck, because the Heavenly Dao does not lie. It has never once lied to me. It has insulted me, mocked me, and offered me a slap that makes a sound from 10 meters away, but it has never lied. Which means the lie is not in the sheet. The lie is in what those 3 people are able to perceive when they look at their own sheet. Something rewrote what my friends can see about themselves and left it running, and has been running it for years. I checked everyone else after that. Both golden cores, the maids, the gate guards, the kitchen, every branch of the Shu clan I could get within eyeshot of. Clean, all of them. Hundreds of people, completely clean. Only the 3 at the top, And every one of those 3 blessing jade slips, I traced them, and it took 2 days, and it was not difficult because nobody had ever tried to hide it, came as a gift from the same man, Xu Wen's elder brother, Tang Yun's father, the man Kai Ning has admired since she was 9 years old. The old city lord of Fallen Moon, Immortal City, whose corpse came home in a box from a neighboring country 3 months ago, and who is currently under 6 feet of earth in the family tomb with the grass already grown over him. I didn't tell them. I sat on it, and I want to be honest about why, and the reason is not tactical. If I walk into that hall and tell Tang Yun that the thing eating her mind was put there by her father, I do not gain an ally. I lose a city lord. She is 42% of the way to not being herself, and the single fastest way to push that number up is to hand her something she cannot survive believing. I told Kai Ning, only Kai Ning. She listened to the whole thing without moving. Then she said one sentence, and she said it without a flicker of doubt, about a man she knew better than anyone alive. Young master is not that kind of person. This concubine understands. She believed me completely, and she believed him completely, and both of those things being true at once is the actual shape of the problem. I took it to Xiao Yu that night. She went very still. Then she told me it had happened before, long before her anomaly. Back when she was a girl on Lingyun Peak with sisters who were still alive, there was a true disciple called Guanzi, senior brother of the man who, decades later, would open the sect's arrays from inside and let 3 demonic sects walk in. Guanzi came back from a treasure hunt with spare blessing jade slips, more than he needed, and he was generous with them, the way a young man who has just gotten lucky is generous. He handed them around the peaks, friends, juniors, anyone he liked. 5 years later, in one night, he and 4 other people went mad and killed several hundred of their own sect brothers and sisters. The elders put them down before dawn. It took the elders, plural, and it took until dawn. The girls Xiao Yu grew up with were in that count. She said their names to me, all of them, in order. She has had a century and a half to forget, and she has not dropped one. Then she gave me the cure, which the sect worked out afterward, at that price. The one who tied the bell must untie it. Kill the planter, or take the planter alive, and the whole thing unravels on its own. It isn't a poison, it isn't a disease, it's a leash, and a leash has a hand on the other end. Clean, simple, actionable, one problem. The hand on the other end of this leash belongs to a man whose funeral I attended. So we went and dug him up, not quietly in the end. I told Tang Yun and Xu Wen and Kai Ning all of it, because you cannot open a man's tomb behind his daughter's back and then ask her to trust you afterward. And because Xiao Yu looked at me across that table and said, without any particular emphasis, that she would be coming. The Tang Mausoleum stands on Ziyun Mountain. It's a hidden dragon site, which means the feng shui of it is worth more than the mountain, and it sits on a 3rd-tier spirit vein behind a 3rd-tier array, and the clan tore out an entire spirit herb garden to put it there. Inside, they had rebuilt his life. Not a tomb chamber, a courtyard. His actual courtyard, 1-to-1, down to the position of the inkstone on the desk and the angle of the chair. And in the middle of it, a coffin. And in the coffin, a body that his family had assembled piece by piece out of what came home in the box. Tang Yun stood over it for a while. "Father," she said, "if you have to blame someone, blame your daughter." Then she opened it. And I looked at a corpse, and a corpse looked back. Because there was a blessing sheet on it, corpses do not have blessing sheets. That is not a rule of etiquette, it is a property of the world. The Heavenly Dao does not keep records for the dead. I had read hundreds of people by then, and I had never once been able to read a body. And I had never thought about why, because nobody thinks about why water is wet. The first line explained it. Body's inherent sorrow. Purple. As long as anyone in the world still cares about you, you do not entirely die. A sliver of life remains. And the second line was the one that took the floor out. Soul-seizing demon. Parasitic. 95 out of 100. This blessing has lost effect, as the host has died. 95. The old city lord of Fallen Moon Immortal City was not the author of any of it. He was the first victim. And here's the reconstruction I did on the walk back down that mountain, which I wrote out on paper afterward because it needed to be written by somebody who wasn't related to him. He found out. Somewhere, in the last year of his life, he saw his own counter, and it said 95. And he understood exactly what that meant, and roughly how many weeks were left before the man wearing his face went home to his children. And he could not tell them, because telling them is how it takes them. So he left the city, and he crossed the border, and he attempted Nascent Soul at odds under 30%, alone, with no support and no retreat. He did not go for power. He went because a 30% chance of dying free was a better deal than a 100% chance of being worn. Xu Wen read that page twice and then sat down in a chair very suddenly, like a man whose legs had been switched off, because a suicide he had been quietly ashamed of for 3 months had just turned into the bravest thing anyone in his family has ever done. I told them the good half. I did not tell them about the first line, about the sliver of life, about the fact that somewhere inside that reassembled body there is still a light on. Tang Yun is 42 out of 100. She does not get to be handed that. Not yet. Xiao Yu gave the verdict on the way home, and she did not soften it. Xu Long is not the planter. Xu Long is dead. The one who tied the bell is somewhere else, and there is nothing left to follow. The trail is cut. Tang Yun started arranging her affairs that same week. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way you do. Signatures, appointments, letters into drawers. My father would rather die than be taken, she said. As his daughter, I won't tarnish him. Cai Ning announced she'd be going with her, in the same tone you'd use to agree to a lunch. And then Tang Yun tried to leave me the city. Fallen Moon, Immortal City. 100 miles across, 100,000 people, a moon revolving in the sky over it. In writing, as a bequest. And I sat there and thought, am I some sort of innate entrusted orphan's sacred body? Is that a thing? First, a dying old man hands me his granddaughter through a crack in a door, and now the city lord is trying to hand me a city on her way out. At what point do I get to be the one who leaves something to somebody else? I declined it, and I told her the only thing I had that was worth saying. This looks hopeless. It isn't. Then I did the arithmetic, because that is the one thing I have always been able to do. The jade slips had dates on them. The counters had numbers on them. 53, 42, 41. Over that many years, at that rate. About 2 years. Then there is nobody left inside any of them. Tang Yun did not believe that a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator was going to solve the thing that killed her father, and she was polite about it, and she was right to think it. We found out where it came from a few days later, and that was worse. Not a Heavenly Dao secret realm, a ruin realm. 65 years ago, the last time Xu Long ever left his own city, from which he came back nearly dead and spent 10 years healing. Xiao Yu went pale when she heard the word ruin, and then told us that the Wind Spirit sect's own massacre traces back to 1-2. Because a Heavenly Dao secret realm is a test. It is built by the thing that runs the universe, and it is fair in its awful way, and if you are clever enough and willing enough, it lets you out. A ruin realm is a house somebody died in, and the traps in it are not natural. They are made. Rings with something living inside them that only asks for a single drop of blood. Techniques with a dead man's soul refined into the pages. Jade slips that are generous. The bait is always opportunity. It has to be. Nothing else gets a cultivator to pick it up. Tang Yun spent her last real hope 4 days later. She had somehow acquired 3 Heavenly Dao replacement jade slips, which rewrite an acquired blessing and which cost more than most families see in a generation, and she used all 3 on herself, one after another. Nothing happened. Nothing happened because soul-seizing demon is not a Heavenly Dao blessing. It is a derivative, a curse wearing a blessing's clothes, a goo poison that learned to write in the Heavenly Dao's handwriting well enough that the Heavenly Dao's own tools do not recognize it as a forgery, which means it cannot be replaced, or rewritten, or bought out, or prayed away. And when that third slip failed, 3 people who had spent their whole lives being the most powerful people in 100 miles turned around and looked at me. So let me put the ledger together one last time, because that is what I do. 9 years ago, I stood in a field with my hands cut open, watching a fat man's scale tell me that 100 bushels of my own rice was 30 bushels, and I said sure, and I meant it. Last season, I sat in a chair while 20 of the richest people in Fallen Moon Immortal City knelt on my floor, and I took 2/10 of a city, forever, and handed their loyalty back to somebody else because I didn't need it. The Wind Spirit sect has an address again. My master has a Dao heart that isn't fighting itself. My eldest senior sister has an egg she won't let anyone touch. My second senior sister has 30,000 spirit stones of my money and a hole under a mountain. And the girl who tore up a letter in my doorway at 14 and ate it rather than let anyone else read it is asleep upstairs. She's my wife. Out of 3 cards, she took the one that was about me, and neither of the 2 that would have made her stronger. And I am the first senior brother of Lingyun Peak, which is a sword lineage, and I cannot forge a sword heart. Every wisp of sword intent in me is my master's. I copied it off her from inside a paper body while she was killing something in her own chest. It has killed a nascent soul true lord for me. It has no foundation anywhere. One day, something is going to lean on it. That's the small problem. The large one is 2 years wide, and it is sitting at a dinner table 3 streets away, inside the heads of 3 people I would trust with my life, moving one number at a time. 53, 42, 41. And there's a 4th number that nobody in that family knows about, because I'm the only one who can see it, and I'm not going to tell them yet. 95 out of 100, on a man who is buried on Ziyun Mountain in a coffin inside a rebuilt courtyard, with a sliver of life still in him.